You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
You magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch!
Captain.
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 Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
No, not yet. Don't pass out immediately. Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk, Bobcat, Saloon radio show, where I'm broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spelled with a K. A mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast. The Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where late at night you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that putrefying edifice. And at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, and palatial SHR Media studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from downtown Sacramento. And be forewarned, what you're about to hear for the next 3 hours consists of my opinion and my opinion only. But because of the fear porn that's gripped this nation, the saloon isn't open, but I am still serving stiff drinks. Facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the back door. And I got to remind you, we don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law. We talk about it all here at the saloon, where the speech is free, but the booze, still, after all this time, is not. This show is a one-trick pony. And it exists as evidence to provide to any people who require such provision that we are still locked down and it has absolutely nothing to do with science. The reason that I created this show is for the doubters. And I also created it because it's a thumb in the eye of Facebook and any social media that still plays this. because I am here tonight to present to you all the videos and the stories and the articles that you have not heard about coronavirus. And at the end of this, if a clear-thinking human being, which excludes at least 50% of the nation at this point, if a clear-thinking individual doesn't go, wait a minute, I didn't know that. I didn't hear about that. I didn't see that video. And say, what are we doing locked down? Well, then I haven't done my job. There are no calls tonight. It's just me for 3 hours. We will be breaking at the bottom and the top of the hour, if for no other reason than to give my voice a break. It's taken me, since March to put this show together, because that's where all of this started. That's where it all began. So I'm going to go over things that you thought you knew, articles you thought you'd heard, and perhaps you'd heard rumors of these things, but that's why I'm here. It's my job to present this. And at the end of this show, I will be presenting, basically, I'm expecting this will take 3 hours. Whenever I'm done, I'm stopping. I have a lot of material to cover. If it's less than 2 hours or 3 hours, that's okay, I'm stopping. If it's over 3 hours, that's okay, I'm stopping when I'm done. There's no one on after me, and it's my show. I want to tell you this. If you get to the end of the show, whether you're listening live or in podcast, do not ignore the end of the show, because there is a terrible story at the end that's going to make you question our humanity. I didn't know about this. I bet you didn't know about this. But in terms of medicine, this is where we are in 2020. I question everything. As I said on my blog, my job is to do the job that the American media maggots won't.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
So it's called coronavirus. Why are we still locked up? And where is the science? All the leftists have said it's all about science. Is it? No. It's because it's the election, baby. I've said it for years, and I'll say it again. I stole the phrase from my civics teacher, Mr. Helms, in the 60s. And Tucker Carlson, damn it, mister, you owe me 25 cents every time you say it. In an election year, everything is about the election. Let me repeat. In an election year, everything is about the election. Everything. Tonight I have citations. I got stories. I got articles. I got videos. I got the facts. This show exists, as I indicated, as an archive, a repository of stories to show those disbelievers who think everything was justified and, frankly, we're all going to die. I guarantee, to date, you have heard little, if any, of this. That's purposeful. That's also why I ask you to reference those doubters to research the articles that I quote here. Do it yourself. You can soak yourself in all the American media maggot GURP you want. Here's the other side of the coin. This is stuff that you're not going to hear. I'll state it up front. It's all fear porn. And it's aimed at President Trump. And it's having little, if anything, to do with science.
Sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
That's what it's about. And to date, I've only found one leftist who had the guts to admit it. Los Angeles Public Health Director Barbara Ferrer. The LA County Health Director says schools are not going to reopen until after the November election. She said this not long ago on September 10th. Listen carefully to what she says. She's actually telling the truth.
I don't realistically anticipate that we would be moving to either Tier 2 or to reopen elections.
Until after we're done with the elections, we're not going to be opening the Los Angeles schools. Well, at least there's one leftist telling the truth, and I could admire that in my own little demented way. So let's cut to the chase up front. I'll present supporting evidence along the way. And the chase is this. The science says, open up the United States of America. Eliminate the lockdown. Welcome to Sergeant Booker in chat. Welcome to the Alaskan in chat. Welcome to the real Mike Pasqua in chat. Welcome to Jack Alexander in chat. A show note. If you're expecting to go to Facebook and see a stream, don't bother. I didn't start Facebook. It's going to do what it did to me the last time, is cut my show completely. So fuck Facebook. I'm not streaming that at all. If you want to watch the show, go to YouTube. Period. End of statement. If YouTube eliminates me, Spreaker won't. You'll have to listen to the entire thing in Spreaker. So the point of this is open up the United States of America. Open up the lockdown. Keep those at greatest risk separated. Allow the economy, employees, and employers. Let everybody get back to work. Get back to work.
A new study from medical scientists at UCLA and Stanford University finds the likelihood of contracting the coronavirus is much, much lower than previously thought. The study, published in late June, says the current probability of becoming infected, going to the hospital, or even death from COVID-19 is, quote, an extremely rare event. The study goes on to say that people are vastly overestimating their chances of getting sick and going to the hospital, especially here in the U.S. As part of the study, doctors reviewed public cases of infection in 100 of the largest counties across the nation. They found that an average person in an average county has a 1 in 3,836 chance of getting infected with the coronavirus.
Wait. That can't be true. The leftists and the American media maggots and the Demorats are all screaming, cases, 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 cases.
And that's without wearing a mask or doing any social distancing. Even the odds of being hospitalized are vanishingly small, even for someone who's in the at-risk category. For an average person between 50 and 64 years old, the chances of getting the virus and needing hospitalization are 1 in 852,000. And for that same person who's at risk, the chances of dying from coronavirus are 1 in 19.1 million. And those figures were for the last week of May, when deaths from coronavirus were 16 times higher than they were last week. Doctors say they were shocked to find out how low the risk of coronavirus really was. It's worth mentioning that compared to the risk of dying from coronavirus, which again is 1 in 19 million, the risk from dying in a car crash is 1 in 114. These figures come after a revelation from the CDC itself that of all deaths attributed to the coronavirus, just 6% actually died from the virus itself. What? The other 94% had severe underlying medical conditions. Combined with this latest data, the case for keeping the country locked down falls apart and reveals the risk to the American public appears much lower than so-called experts like Dr. Anthony Fauci had claimed.
Imagine that. But if you were to suspect that I had information about the beloved Dr. Anthony Fauci, well, you'd be correct. Let's begin with this purposely neglected article from the Washington Examiner. Study, coronavirus restrictions killing 10,000 children per month and wasting and stunting millions more. Didn't hear about that article, I bet. A new study shows coronavirus restrictions and lockdowns are leading to the deaths of 10,000 children per month and stunting the growths of millions more. This is from the Washington Examiner. This isn't from Bill's blog. Just thought I'd tell you. It's been 7 months since the first COVID-19 cases were reported. It's increasingly clear the repercussions of the pandemic are causing more harm to children than the disease itself. UNICEF Executive Director Henriette Foray said, household poverty and food insecurity rules have increased. Rates have increased. The study conducted by researchers at Johns Hopkins University and published in The Lancet Medical Journal, said hunger stemming from coronavirus restrictions is causing the death of 10,000 children per month and stunting the growth of another 50,000 children. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. Stunting the growth of 550,000 per month. Yeah, this is The Lancet, folks. And Johns Hopkins University, you know, those standard right-wing organs. Dr. David Samadi, at work, practicing every day and hated, despised by leftists and social media who have consistently removed and blocked his information, unlike somebody by the initials of AF, recently wrote and asked, per CDC numbers, according to the CDC, and through the end of July, the average number of total deaths in the United States per day was 7,434 this year. In 2017, there were an average of more than 7,700 deaths per day in the United States. Where is the major increase in COVID-19 related deaths? Statistics and science. It's all about the science. So say leftists and the Demorats. And why I'm proving that locking up American citizens is absolutely unscientific. Dr. Richard Harrison wrote, I'm an MD. I got COVID-19 on March 24th. I took HCQ and zinc, that's hydroxychloroquine. I went from the sickest I've ever been to afebrile and symptom-free within 24 hours. Now, his tweets and social media have also been taken down because leftists and Demorats can't afford to have an easy or ready solution to Wuhan 19, and things certainly cannot be ameliorated before November 3rd, precisely as that LA director Ferrer said. A New York doctor shared with Sean Hannity his hydroxychloroquine azithromycin results. 200 milligrams twice daily hydroxy, 500 milligram once daily azithromycin, 220 milligrams once daily zinc sulfate. In 350 patients, breathing restored 3 to 4 hours, 0 deaths, 0 hospitalizations, 0 intubations. Now, an article from 2017 no one wants you to know about as well, which was eliminated from social media, said, malaria drugs could also help to combat cancer. Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, two very clear drugs associated with the solution, are drugs that are used to treat malaria, but a new review suggests they may have another purpose, treating cancer. The research, which reviewed more than 190 studies investigating how chloroquine, CQ, and hydroxychloroquine, HCQ, affect cancer cells, describes how the malaria drugs may increase tumor sensitivity to existing cancer treatments. You didn't hear about that. A number of doctors and colleagues believe the drugs CQ and HCQ could help in this fight. And then there was this in late July when Ohio pharmacists, not from any other state, just Ohio, decided they were going to refuse to fill prescriptions for hydroxychloroquine. Well, let's just say I drew serious crap from leftists and pharmacists when I wrote something similar to, oh, right, yeah, pharmacists clearly know better than doctors in terms of how to treat their individual patients. I blocked a few Twitter assholes and I motored on. The pharmacists, shock of shocks, later withdrew their ban at the request of Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, but why ban it in the first place? Well, I think you know why. OMB. Dr. Stephen Smith weighed in, and of course he was eliminated from YouTube completely. He's an infectious disease specialist. He talked about using hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin to treat COVID-19. He said, it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer. I think this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic, and I am very serious.
Extremely important news that we're breaking tonight on the Ingram angle. Dr. Smith's one of the most preeminent infectious disease specialists in the United States. His father was a legend. But Dr. Smith, You pointed out that not a single patient of yours, COVID patient, that has been on the hydroxy regimen has had to be intubated. For people who don't know what intubated means, please explain quickly.
Yeah, so intubated means you're in respiratory failure and you have to be put on a ventilator. Intubation means actually putting the tube down into your trachea and then you're placed on a ventilator for support, respiratory support. We've had, I mentioned, the 20 intubations. Over most all of them occurred in the first 2 days. More importantly, no person has received 5 days or more of the hydroxychloroquine and Zithro combination has been intubated. The chance of that occurring by chance, according to my sons Leon and Hunter, who did some stats for me, are 0.000 something. It's ridiculously low depending on how you look at it. Yeah. It's ridiculously low no matter how you look at it. We worry about selection bias in this situation, but I cannot think of a reason why, if all else is equal, why people that have received 5 days or more, or even 4 days or more, this hydroxychloroquine Zithro regimen wouldn't get intubated. In other words, if the regimen didn't work, why would it just be the people that didn't get nearly complete the regimen? Most of the people were in the first 2 days.
Right, Dr. Smith, we're going to have you. We're going to have you back. Yeah, it's a game changer, correct?
It's a game changer. It's absolute game changer. I think these data go to really support the French data. Now you actually have an intra-cohort comparison saying that this regimen works. And I'll get some real statisticians besides my sons to look at that.
What people weren't telling you is that the French were working on this combination for quite some time. Funny thing is, I've always had this question. Haven't you? If hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc simply didn't work, then why are leftist elements so terribly worried about Americans having direct access to it if prescribed by a doctor? Well, there are clear answers to that. Number one, power and control by the leftists and Demorats. Number two, President Trump can't be allowed any win whatsoever. 3, even if that win means saving American lives. And number 4, translated, because I speak leftist, Demorats and leftists truly don't give a shit about you. And then there was this from CBN.com. Yale medical expert, hydroxychloroquine saves lives. Propaganda war is killing people. This is from July. As the number of deaths from COVID-19 rises, the debate over the effectiveness of the anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine has also persisted. In an op-ed published by Newsweek, Yale epidemiology professor Dr. Harvey Risch wrote that hydroxychloroquine is highly effective, especially when given in combination with the antibiotics azithromycin or doxycycline and the nutritional supplement zinc. Risch said the drug works against the virus when taken early before it multiplies throughout the body. Now, aren't you asking yourself some questions right now? Yeah, you should be. He said some physicians who prescribed hydroxychloroquine to patients are now being scrutinized for their actions because it's working. Now, as referenced, the Newsweek article, a source beloved by leftists, also indicates the key to defeating COVID-19 already exists. We need to start using it. That's an opinion by that doctor, Harvey Risch. So he was talking, he says, quote, I'm referring, of course, to the medication hydroxychloroquine. When this inexpensive oral medication is given very early in the course of illness, before the virus has had time to multiply beyond control, it's shown to be highly effective, especially when given in combination with the antibiotics azithromycin or doxycycline and the nutritional supplement zinc. Of course, that article was buried, ignored, never repeated by anyone in the American media Maggot regime. You can never afford to give even the slightest win to OMB, no matter how many Americans you just happen to kill in the process. Now, there is this article from the WHO, the World Health Organization, indicating Wuhan 19 doesn't follow seasons. WHO says COVID-19 pandemic is one big wave, not seasonal. From Geneva, A World Health Organization official on Tuesday described the COVID-19 pandemic as, quote, one big wave, and warned against complacency in the Northern Hemisphere summer since the infection does not share influenza's tendency to follow seasons. Again, aren't you asking yourself some questions right about now? Well, here's our beloved Dr. Fauci. When are we going to get over this? Huh? Well, if you read him right, we ought to be prepared to be on lockdown till, I don't know. How does 2021 sound to you? Because obviously, it would appear that 2020 is way too early. I'll be right back after this.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey, this is Michael Wright.
And I'm Shannon Wright.
Join us for The Right Way with Shannon and Mike, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on SHR Media.
Why are they joining us?
For fun things like sports, politics.
Oh, maybe some news and entertainment?
And all kinds of other things.
Money and recipes and events, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so join us Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. here on shrmedia.com.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
Hey girls, Carry Girl Gear is here. More and more women every day are concealed carrying, participating in competitive shooting, and getting firearms training. It's not a boys' club anymore, and we don't have to shop in their stores anymore either. Finally, a cool and unique clothing line just for women. Dope tees and hats for the patriotic concealed carry and 2A girl. So what are you waiting for? Go check out carrygirlgear.com today.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
The new show on the SHR Media Network, Sackheads Against Tyranny. On shrmedia.com. Go there quick like a bunny, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Wednesday. Live and direct on the SHR Media Network. shrmedia.com. Be there.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, a mere 2 miles from the state capital, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Pacific and 11 p.m. Eastern. Only on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com to listen. You can also watch on the SHR Media Facebook page and the SHR Media YouTube channel. No goldfish were abused in the making of this ad. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And we're back. I'm BZ, the bloviating Zeppelin. You're in the Saloon. Tonight, it's a special 3-hour SHR Media special report. And it's about the coronavirus. Why are we still locked down? Where's the science? All the leftists and the Demorats are saying we're locked down because... well, hashtag because science. Science! They're blinding me with it. Well, Dr. Fauci, ever the positive guy says, well, we might have to wait, I don't know, another year?
Coronavirus emergency. We are marking a somber date today. It is exactly 6 months to the day since the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. The death toll currently topping 191,000, with 23 states now seeing an increase in cases, some of those fueled by students returning to campus.
Okay, some of those fueled by students returning to campus. Are they dying? No. Do they mention that? No. Is there a reference in terms of the flu, the standard flu, to put things in perspective? And the answer is...
Here's Victor Okendo with more.
No.
This morning, the grim outlook from the nation's top infectious disease doctor.
Grim!
This fight is far from over.
I just think we need to hunker down and get through this fall and winter.
Dr. Anthony Fauci warning Americans not to underestimate the virus.
Don't ever underestimate the potential of the pandemic, and don't try and look at the rosy side of things.
Don't try to look at the rosy side of things. Stop everything. Get under your desk and quiver in abject fear. That's what leftists and Demorats and Dr. Fauci want for you. Has anybody ever questioned the motivations of Dr. Fauci? Does anybody ask questions anymore? I do. That's why I'm here tonight. Well, hold that thought, because wait, there's more. We seem to have forgotten these doctors, which social media has done yeoman's work in an attempt to remove from sight. We're listening to a doctor. Why aren't we listening to, I don't know, doctors?
Because the fear of this drug has driven the whole political situation has driven the fear towards this drug. So let's
hydroxychloroquine.
Address that. This drug is super safe. It's safer.
By the way, you can't find this on the internet anymore. You can't find this on Twitter anymore. You can't find this on YouTube anymore.
Aspirin, Motrin, Tylenol. It's super safe, all right? So what the problem is in a lot of those studies, they did very, very high doses, massive doses. All through the country, they did the REMAP study, the Solidarity trial. That was the World Health Organization trial, and also the recovery trial. They used 2,400 milligrams in the first day. All you need is 200 twice a week for prophylaxis. They used massive toxic doses, and guess what they found out? When you use massive toxic doses, you get toxic results. The drug doesn't work when you give toxic doses, okay? It's a very safe drug. It concentrates in the lungs, 200 to 700 times higher in the lungs. It's an amazing drug because in the bloodstream, you're not going to get high levels, but you get massive levels in the lungs. So you're going to find yourself, if you're prophylaxed, as soon as the virus gets there, it's going to have a hard time getting through because the hydroxychloroquine blocks it from getting in. And then once it gets in, it won't let the virus, it won't let it actually replicate. It'll actually bring in zinc, and zinc will mess up the copy machine called the RDRP. So with the...
Oh, this guy's just making it up, right? He's a doctor. He doesn't know anything. He's making it up. He's practicing. Dr. Fauci's practicing too, isn't he? Practicing money.
Combination of drugs, it's incredibly effective in the early disease. By itself, it's incredibly effective as a prophylaxis. So I hope does that answer the question?
Yeah, I want to emphasize on something that Dr. Urza just said because I love the question. This is a treatment regimen that's very simple. and it should be in the hands of the American people. The difficult aspect of this is that at the moment, because of politics, it's being blocked from doctors prescribing it, and it's being blocked from pharmacists releasing it. They've been empowered to overrule the doctor's opinion.
Yep.
Why is this not over the counter as you can get it in much of the world? In almost all of Latin.
Oh, hold that thought, because we'll be discussing that too. Listen to what she says.
America, in Iran, in Indonesia, in sub-Saharan Africa. You can just go and buy it yourself. And the dose, my friends, is 200 milligrams twice in a week and zinc daily. That's the dose. I'm in favor of it being over the counter.
So, imagine that. Are there other places in the world where that's prescribed, or you can just go ahead and get it? Think about that just for a second. Think about that. Then this is from another source. Doctors with coronavirus treatment face Orwellian suppression. That's all from social media, as I indicated. Several doctors across the country, apparently successfully treating the Chinese coronavirus, are experiencing an Orwellian-like oppression by the media and government regulators. When reputable Texas doctors offered the world evidence of apparently successful treatment plans for the coronavirus, you might have expected medical researchers and leaders to rush to explore the feasibility of that treatment plan. Instead, leaders have shunned the news. Mainstream media has gone into hyperdrive to discredit the doctors, which is why you can't find their videos today. And medical elites have refused to explore the treatment plans. And now tech giants have removed and suppressed viral social media posts containing information from those medical professionals regarding their treatments. Remember, and I'll talk about this in a bit, remember when everybody said, well, the reputable source has to be the CDC. The reputable source has to be Dr. Fauci. It's a terrifying act of suppression straight out of George Orwell's 1984. The most well-known treatment plan receiving the most pushback is the use of hydroxychloroquine, a common drug used for treating malaria, combined with zinc tablets and an antibiotic. In other words, it's not $9,000 a dose, like other things we'll talk about. And another video, since derezzed from the bulk of social media, with praises for praises for hydroxychloroquine. Here comes Dr. Simone Gold to talk about something very similar.
I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Congressman. So we're here because we feel as though the American people have not heard from all the expertise that's out there all across our country. We do have some experts speaking, but there's lots and lots of experts across the country. So some of us decided to get together. We're America's frontline doctors. We're here only to help American patients and the American nation heal. We have a lot of information to share. Americans are riveted and captured by fear at the moment. We are not held down by the virus as much as we're being held down by the spider web of fear.
Bingo.
That spider web is all around us, and it's constricting us, and it's draining the lifeblood of the American people, American society, and American economy.
Absolutely. By the way, I should tell you, if you haven't already discovered, you want to find out where some of these videos still live? Some of them still live. They live on BitChute, BitChute, BitChute. A brief reminder, by the way. Remember the John Lewis funeral in Atlanta on July 30th? Now, all those folks attending the John Lewis funeral from D.C. were supposed to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, according to D.C. law, when they returned. Do you think anybody did? Any one of those? Hell no. Not one. Not even one. Laws are for little people, proles, serfs, groundlings, servants, subjects, not for the D.C. elite. Amir Sarfati wrote, can someone report this church to the authorities for holding an indoor service with more than 50 people? Wait. It's a funeral of a politician where a failed former U.S. president held an election campaign under the guise of a eulogy. That's right. The rules, they don't apply here. and another little remembered event involving Dr. Anthony Fauci. Because remember, they're saying Anthony Fauci hates Trump, and he never, ever gave Trump, nor does Trump deserve credit for anything, not anything.
Fauci, let me ask you about some of the decisions that you worked with President Trump on, and the whole team did. I know when you go back to the beginning of this, the China ban was very heavily discussed. Were you involved in working with President Trump on deciding to ban flights from China?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I was.
Do you agree with that decision?
I do.
Do you think that decision saved lives, Dr. Fauci?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with the decision when ultimately we saw spread in Europe, and then the president recommended that we extend that to Europe? Did you participate in that discussion?
I was actively involved in that discussion, sir.
Do you agree with that decision?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that decision saved lives?
Yes, I do.
Eventually, then, we saw the United Kingdom have an outbreak, and there had to be a tough decision made.
Yeah.
Do we extend that to the United Kingdom? Were you part of that decision?
I was.
And do you agree with that decision as well?
I do.
Did that decision save lives?
Yes, it did.
When you look at the 15 days to slow the spread, initially it started at 15. Were you part of the decision to implement that decision?
I was very much involved in that.
Did that decision save lives, Dr. Fauci?
I believe it did.
Then when President Trump met with you and Dr. Birx to extend that another 30 days, do you agree with that decision that President Trump made to extend that?
Yes, I was very much involved, and I agree with it.
Did that decision save lives, Dr. Fauci?
I believe it did.
So I know we've heard a lot about disagreements. Clearly, there are many decisions made. In fact, there are many very internationally respected doctors that are involved in each of those decisions. Is that correct?
Yes.
By and large, would you say that you and President Trump have been in agreement on most of those decisions?
We were in agreement on virtually all of those.
We were in agreement on virtually all of those. AmericanGreatness.com wrote, Money in Politics Behind Anti-Hydroxychloroquine Bias, a new report suggests. Remdesivir, an antiviral medication that was developed by the biopharmaceutical company Gilead Sciences, has been widely touted as the most promising drug to treat COVID-19, even though so far the new and expensive drug does not seem to be terribly effective at fighting the disease. The anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine, on the other hand, is cheap, has been used safely for decades, and has shown great promise as a weapon in the fight against the coronavirus. Yet after President Trump mentioned it as a promising potential treatment for the disease, the media immediately blasted him for touting an unproven and potentially unsafe drug. Those are stories you haven't heard, right? Cheryl Atkinson says, follow the money. To find out why the two drugs have been treated so differently, not surprisingly, she found many of the people promoting remdesivir have major conflicts of interest. She first spoke with cardiologist Dr. William O'Neill, a medical director at the Henry Ford Health System in Detroit, Michigan. Hold that name, that facility in your brain for a couple of minutes, where both remdesivir and hydroxychloroquine are being studied. O'Neill told Atkinson, the media's attempts to disprove and discredit hydroxychloroquine has been very harmful. That's a quote. I think those of us that are actually involved in the scientific endeavor feel that there is some value to it and it has to be tested. Joining many other doctors who have gone on the record to praise hydroxychloroquine as a promising treatment for coronavirus. O'Neill said he's seen improvement in every coronavirus patient to whom he has prescribed the drug. Remdesivir, on the other hand, leaves him cold. Wait. Aren't the Demorats yelling from the highest towers that only Republicans are politicizing Wuhan-19 and its treatments? It turns out I've been correct for quite some time. One of my multiple BZ axioms goes something like this. Whatever the Demorats accuse you of, they're doing themselves. Then there's this, as we all pretty much suspected all along. Dr. Hatfield told Atkinson that some of the decisions being made concerning the drugs do not seem to be rational, and that when it seems like a clear path is not taken very often, money is somehow involved. The experts on a government panel that devised the coronavirus treatment guidelines talked up remdesivir but downplayed hydroxychloroquine. Full Measure checked into their financial ties to see if there were any conflicts of interest there. This is a quote. We found that 11 members reporting links to a drug company, 9 of them named relationships to remdesivir's maker, Gilead, Atkinson said. This is me holding up my hand. I speak leftist. Please allow me to translate. Hydroxychloroquine is cheap, efficient, and doesn't cost megadollars. But it being advocated by OMB, and therefore, if that occurs, it can't be embraced for any reason. Politics and money, money and politics, politics and money. In an election year, everything is about the election. Haven't you ever wondered this? I wish I'd seen something like this in social media. Maybe you have, I haven't. But I asked myself, because I've always wondered, wouldn't it be interesting to somehow get Dr. Anthony Fauci to sit down and take a blood test? You know, just to see if he's taking hydroxychloroquine and or azithromycin and or zinc prophylactically. And here's something that the fact checkers tell you isn't true. But it is. We've known this for some time, but it continues to keep getting buried. Dr. Fauci approved chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, 15 years ago to cure coronaviruses. Quote, nobody needed to die. Dr. Anthony Fauci, whose expert advice to President Trump has resulted in the complete shutdown of the greatest economic regime in world history, has known since 2005 that chloroquine is an effective inhibitor of coronaviruses. Well, ask questions. How did he know this? Because of research done by the National Institute of Health, of which he is the director, in connection with the SARS outbreak, caused by a coronavirus dubbed SARS-CoV-2, the NIH, that he's the director of, researched chloroquine and concluded that it was effective at stopping the SARS coronavirus in its tracks. The COVID-19 bug is likewise a coronavirus labeled SARS-CoV-2. While it isn't exactly the same virus as CoV-1, it is genetically related to it, and it shares 79% of its genome. As the name SARS-CoV-2 implies, they both use the same host cell receptor, which is what viruses use to gain entry to the cell and infect the victim. So that's part and parcel of why I love the internet and its concomitant memory. If you just know how to research, you can find so many things. And the American media maggots are absolutely clueless and are not interested in doing any research whatsoever. Well, they're kids. What do you expect? First, they have no experience. 2, they don't care. They've not received an education. That's a story for another day. The Virology Journal, the official publication of Dr. Fauci's National Institute of Health, published what is now a blockbuster article on August 22nd, 2005, under the heading, here it is, I don't think you can get more obvious than this, chloroquine is a potent inhibitor of SARS coronavirus infection and spread. Write the researchers, we report that chloroquine has strong antiviral effects on SARS-CoV infection of primate cells. These inhibitory effects are observed when the cells are treated with the drug either before or after exposure to the virus, suggesting both prophylactic and therapeutic advantage. Why has Dr. Fauci asked questions? Why has Dr. Fauci seemed to push back on hydroxychloroquine? Do you suspect there's an easy answer there? I did. So I went to the internet and I looked like anybody else can. because he is aligned with an interest in remdesivir, which is much more costly per dose. Fauci's remdesivir costs $9 per dose. It's going to be sold at $3,000 per treatment. Chinese company linked to Soros will also mass produce the drug. The Association of American Physicians and Surgeons filed a lawsuit against the Department of Health and Human Services and the FDA for irrational interference by the FDA with timely access to hydroxychloroquine. Never in history have we seen such a determined effort by the scientific community and pharmaceutical industry to downplay and lie about the use of a successful drug to treat a deadly disease. Now, clear-thinking individuals, of course, that excludes the American media maggots, leftists, and Demorats, would be asking again, as I indicate, a litany of questions which they aren't. Hydroxychloroquine is the first choice in a study of 6,000 doctors treating the coronavirus. In the field and in independent testing, hydroxychloroquine displayed amazing results in treating the COVID-19 virus. But there was great pushback against hydroxychloroquine for two reasons. The first reason was because it was safe and very inexpensive. The second reason is because Donald Trump promoted its use. You're going to be seeing the studies, and I'm going to be talking about them, which prove that, as reported earlier, from the beginning, Dr. Fauci was against the use of hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus. Fauci was thrilled about its use just a few years ago, 2005. Now, Dr. Fauci did promote the use of remdesivir. He was excited to share the news on its effectiveness. The company Gilead, as I indicated, produces remdesivir. Gilead is partnered with Wuxi, W-U-X-I, App Tech, A-P-P, Tech, T-E-C. You can find that on the internet. A company that WorldNet Daily states is owned partly by George Soros. Connecting the dots, you're welcome. The one person behind the promotion of Gilead's remdesivir is the doctor who has worked with Gilead for a long time, Dr. Fauci. He's also downplayed and criticized the use of the much cheaper drug hydroxychloroquine. Can there be any uncertainty as to why Dr. Fauci, who worked closely with Gilead, is strongly promoting its more expensive and less effective medication, which has already failed against Ebola, over a readily available, markedly affordable medication with a 91% success rate? But wait, there's more. Gilead said the drug is going to cost $520 per vial, or $3,120 for a 6-vial treatment. A previous report at Bloomberg noted the cost to manufacture remdesivir is $9 per treatment. Hydroxychloroquine is $1 per treatment. Dr. Anthony Fauci knew about the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine back in 2005. He conveniently forgot all about that in 2020. And as I told you, that 2005 information is in the virology journal. It's all linked back to Fauci. He was head, he was director, he knew all about it. But then he completely forgot about it. Remember I said, Dr. Fauci, he's an immunologist. He served as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, since 1984. NIAID is one of 27 institutes that make up the NIH. So let me ask you a question, because I ask questions. That's verboten in today's society. Do you think Dr. Fauci is stupid? Do you think he doesn't read his own virology journal? Yeah, me neither. Now, as far as Dr. Fauci is concerned, hydroxychloroquine will damn near kill you.
The president again today repeated his endorsement of hydroxychloroquine, which the FDA said in June should not be used for COVID because it does not have known effects, known benefits, and it does have known risks for cardiac effects. So how damaging is that he retweeted the video and defended it again today.
Well, the only thing that I can do, Andrea, is do what I've done all along consistently, is that you look at the scientific data and the evidence. And the scientific data, the cumulative data on trials, clinical trials that were valid, namely clinical trials that were randomized and controlled in the proper way. All of those trials show consistently that hydroxychloroquine is not effective in the treatment of coronavirus disease or COVID-19.
Money. But wait, what else do we know about our beloved Dr. Fauci? How about this from Newsweek.com? Newsweek. Dr. Fauci backed controversial Wuhan lab with U.S. dollars for risky coronavirus research. This was unearthed back in April of this year. Dr. Anthony Fauci is an advisor to President Donald Trump and something of an American folk hero for his steady, calm leadership during the pandemic crisis. Yeah, that's Newsweek. At least one poll shows Americans trust Fauci more than Trump on the coronavirus pandemic, and few scientists are portrayed on TV by Brad Pitt. That incisive, Newsweek. But last year, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, the organization led by Dr. Fauci, funded scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other institutions for work on gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses. Gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses. Wonder what that is. I'll tell you when we come back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York, the Lid himself, Jeff Dunitz. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunitz.
For 50 years, I've seen the American people blinded by corrupt politicians, a lapdog media, and deceptive Islam. The one thing the elites fear is one man with a cane. I'm Dave Milner. Join me through Spreaker, iTunes, and SoundCloud, through SHR Media and the Western Free Radio Network, for half a century of experienced perspective on political and social issues, weekly on The Unpleasant Blind Guy. And catch me on Jeff Mitchell's EDL Radio on blogtalkradio.com. There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
This is Shannon Wright of The Right Way with Shannon and Mike in the AM. Mike's not here, so I gotta talk fast. You gotta join us. Fall season. Getting ready to start up with a whole bunch of new stuff. News and food and politics and sports and entertainment and a whole bunch of stuff. But wait, Mike's coming. I gotta go. Remember, Shannon and Mike in the AM on SHR Media, Monday through Thursday, 7 to 9 a.m. Make sure you tune in.
Featuring right thinking from a left brain and doing the job the American maggots won't. BZ is fundamentally changing America, one diaper at a time. Just when safety pin manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, where the speech is free, but the drinks are not. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon can be heard every Tuesday and Thursday night, commencing at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific, where pushback is a requisite art form in and of itself. Let your ossicles be truly liberated when you listen to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon, only on SHR Media Network. No ferrets were harmed in the making of this ad.
Join me,
Jack Alexander for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian sackheads Clint, plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty void in Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And of course, once again, I am a terrible self-promoter. If you would, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the SHR Media YouTube channel, pretty please. Hit share. Share it as many times as you possibly can. If you're listening on Spreaker, please hit share as well, so more people can be aware of the show and all of the things that I'm telling you, because this is all the truth. I didn't write this stuff. Actual individuals wrote it. Doctors are talking about it, and they sure as hell know much better than me about this stuff. Always ask questions. Ask questions. Share everything I have, pretty please. Thanks to Mike for being in chat. Sergeant Booker, Whiskey Dale, Sarah Nichols, the Alaskan Jack Alexander, and 2 viewers who shall not be unmasked because we don't do that here. I am BZ, the Bloviating Zeppelin. This is BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where tonight I am doing an SHR Media special report. The coronavirus. Why are we still in lockdown? Where is the science? Welcome, Dave. So I asked just before the break. Last year, the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the organization led by Dr. Fauci, funded scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and other institutions for work on gain-of-function research on bat coronavirus. Gain-of-function research, what is that? In 2019, with the backing of NIAID, the National Institute of Health committed $3.7 million over 6 years for research that included some gain-of-function work. The program followed another $3.7 million 5-year project for collecting and studying bat coronaviruses, which ended in 2019, bringing the total to $7.4 million. China, Wuhan, coronavirus. Who's responsible for that? Oh, I'll tell you, it gets better. Many scientists have criticized gain-of-function research, which involves manipulating viruses in the lab to explore their potential for infecting humans, because it creates a risk of starting a pandemic from accidental release. Well, actually, it gets much, much worse. The work in question that was funded was a type of gain-of-function research that involved taking wild viruses and passing them through live animals until they mutate into a form that could pose a pandemic threat. Scientists use it to take a virus that was poorly transmitted among humans and make it into one that was highly transmissible, a hallmark of a pandemic virus. This work was done by infecting a series of ferrets, allowing the virus to mutate until a ferret that hadn't been deliberately infected contracted the disease. You work on it again and again and again. The work entailed risks that worried even some seasoned researchers. More than 200 scientists called for the work to be halted. The problem, they said, is that it increased the likelihood that a pandemic would occur through a laboratory accident. Just wait until you hear what a Chinese virologist thinks happened with Wuhan 19. Was it some kind of an accident? You conspiracy theorists! You tinfoil hat wearers! And knowing what you know now, what do you think of this little bit from Dr. Fauci? I think this was 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Given, as you heard from the introduction, that I have been around for a while and have had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations, I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak.
What?
There will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relatively short presentation, you will understand why history, the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID, will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with.
A surprise outbreak for the next administration, says Dr. Fauci in 2017. Well, as you listen to the show at the beginning, I'm all out of bubblegum. And in 2020, I'm all out of Coinky Dink. I always ask questions. Social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Google, they don't want you asking any questions, damn you. None. Other doctors' opinions, medical professionals, nothing can be in contravention of their views because none of them are, drum roll please, sorry I don't have a drum roll, medical professionals. So, what has social media done and accomplished? They have ripped and removed articles and videos out by active practicing doctors and other medical scholars. They're ignoring tests. They're ignoring studies. They're ignoring actual real-world results. When conversely, medicine and science should be literally all about asking questions, acquiring additional opinions, testing, prodding, trials, assessment, more questions, more appraisals. But what if you were a certain doctor, and what if you were instrumental in purposely or unwittingly creating a plague with a vaccine at your fingertips? That's going to be a real cash cow. Wouldn't you want to minimize the cheapest solution in favor of something with some real monetary zing and pow? I'm not saying that's etched in stone, but I am doing something the American media maggots won't. I'm asking questions. Here's from Scott Adams. I'm not persuaded that hydroxychloroquine is an effective coronavirus treatment, but if I tested positive for coronavirus and I couldn't get HCQ plus zinc plus azithromycin within 24 hours, I'd start breaking all sorts of laws without remorse. Funny how that works. Here's an actual cogent article that I discovered. Kind of shocking. From the Washington Post, where democracy dies in D.C. The coronavirus pandemic is pushing America into a mental health crisis. Anxiety and depression are rising. The U.S. is ill-prepared, and some clinics already are on the brink of collapse. This is back in May. 3 months into the coronavirus pandemic, the country is on the verge of another health crisis, and daily doses of death, isolation, and fear generating widespread psychological trauma. I bet you yourself know somebody that is really upset these days. But if you ask leftists and Demorats, this is really their least addressed of their concerns. They don't want to bring this topic up. Move along. Nothing to see here. These are not the reasons to unlock America that you're looking for. And while almost everybody is experiencing increased stress, the effect for many is going to be transient. Trouble sleeping, shorter fuses. The difficulty is identifying and treating those who develop deeper, worrisome mental problems such as post-traumatic stress disorder and severe depression. So let's gaze back in history for a moment and ask ourselves, what has pushed this frenzy, this reaction that I have called for some time fear porn? Because it wasn't always like this in the United States. Let's throw in a little bit of history right about now. Anybody remember the Asian flu of 1957? Well, I was alive then. I was 7 years old. I was a kid. I don't remember my parents making any mention of it whatsoever. Or the Hong Kong flu of 1968 that killed over 100,000 people, the equivalent of 160,000 people today in terms of percentile. I don't remember that. I remember the Summer of Love in 1967. I remember the movie Bullet in 1968. I remember both Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy being assassinated in 1968. I don't remember crap about any flu. I was a senior in high school. David Horowitz wrote, "The 1957 Asian flu, a form of H2N2 influenza that is believed to have originated in China, is estimated to have killed 116,000 Americans, the equivalent of roughly 200,000 Americans in today's larger society. Given that an estimated 25% of the entire country contracted the flu and a much larger share suffered from strong symptoms, one has to wonder what the recorded death toll would have been had we tested everyone and counted those deaths as liberally as we do today. So for even greater context," David Horowitz writes, "keep in mind that there were only about 4.9 million people over the age of 75 back then, as opposed to 23 million today. So while the general population was slightly more than half of what it is today, the over 75 population was approximately 1/5 of what it is today. The over 90 population was 1/12 of today's advanced senior population. Accordingly, the death toll in 1957 was even more severe than with COVID-19 when one considers how many more seniors we have today. After all, the median age of death from COVID-19 is 78, roughly around life expectancy, with roughly half of all deaths occurring amongst sicker seniors in nursing homes. That's called a clue. Oh, the anarchy we had in 1957 and 1968. It was off the charts. Shutdowns, testing, the economy tanked because of it. No, it didn't. Somehow we muscled through it and we soldiered on. Horowitz writes, "Another dangerous aspect of the Asian flu as compared to COVID-19 is that it seemed to be more dangerous to pregnant women and to cause birth defects." Hey, remember what was occurring in that amount of time? Anybody remember something called thalidomide? I do. Similar to what was observed during the Spanish flu, a study published in Minnesota in 1959 found that nearly 20% of deaths that occurred during pregnancy were due to the 1957-1958 epidemic, making it the leading cause of death for pregnant women during those months. 1/2 of all women of childbearing age who died during the epidemic were pregnant. Now, if that were true today, we would have lost our shit 3 times over. The panic would have people wearing full-body DuPont Tyvek suits. Nobody's going to be driving trucks, delivering goods, providing services. Grocery stores would be closed. There'd be chaos, panic, and riots. Here's the kicker. There was never a thought in 57 and 68 to shut down people's lives. Nobody ever thought that humans could stop the spread of the actual virus. Hence, few remember living through it. Compare that to today. Back then, we didn't shut down the economy. We didn't kill small businesses in favor of mega businesses and chains. We didn't quarantine people. He writes, "Quarantine was not considered to be an effective mitigation strategy and was obviously useless because of the large number of travelers and the frequency of mild or unapparent cases." Sound familiar? Except today we're doing the opposite. In 2006, a man named D.A. Henderson, the former dean of Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, wrote, "There are no historical observations or scientific studies that support the confinement by quarantine of groups of possibly infected people for extended periods in order to slow the spread of influenza." Horowitz concluded thusly, from 1957 until fairly recently, before the medical profession was politicized, they all understood that we lack the ability to stop the spread of a flu-like virus. The best we can do is to treat it without sowing panic. So as Henderson warned in 2006, experience has shown communities faced with epidemics or other adverse events respond best and with the least anxiety when the normal social functioning of the community is the least disrupted. What a shame that Henderson and the common sense that defined America until recently are no longer living. Then this story from the Washington Examiner, which was absolutely buried by the American media maggots, burned, and then the ashes of it were burned. CDC director acknowledges hospitals have a monetary incentive to overcount coronavirus deaths. CDC director acknowledges hospitals have a monetary incentive to overcount coronavirus deaths. That was from August. U.S. Centers for Disease Control Prevention Director Robert Redfield agreed that some hospitals have a monetary incentive to overcount coronavirus deaths, as they do deaths for other diseases. I think you're correct in that we've seen this in other disease processes too. Really, in the HIV epidemic, somebody may have a heart attack, but also have HIV. The hospital would prefer the classification for HIV because there's greater reimbursement. Redfield said during a House panel hearing, when asked by Representative Blaine Lutzkmeyer, that's a mouthful, about potential perverse incentives. So Redfield continued, "So I do think there's some reality to that. When it comes to death reporting, though, ultimately it's how the physician defines it in the death certificate, and we review all those death certificates. So I think probably it is less operable in the cause of death, although I won't say there aren't some cases. I do think, though, that when it comes to hospital reimbursement issues or individuals that get discharged, there could be some play in that for sure. Some play in that for sure." Glenn Beck interviewed Dr. Simone Gold, who is a board-certified emergency physician. She attended Stanford Law School. She's a doctor. She's a lawyer. She worked for the Surgeon General in D.C. She's working as a physician on the front lines in the city, country, and reservations, and founded American Frontline Doctors. I couldn't find her video. I couldn't embed it. I found it. I couldn't play it. I couldn't embed it because Facebook won't allow the video to be embedded. Why? Because she discusses the utilization of hydroxychloroquine. The rules of Wuhan 19, the science of it all, is what I call kabuki theater of the absurd. This is something from the New York Post. All the COVID safety rules are little more than theater. And this is from August. If you go to a restaurant in Gotham right now, she means New York City, you might be subjected to a temperature check. It's no big deal. It takes a second, but it's pointless. Plenty of COVID-positive people don't have a fever. So why do we do it? It's part of a growing trend of COVID-19 security theater. We do things that have no bearing on our actual safety, but make us feel safe. Take masks. It makes sense to wear masks inside businesses or for any close contact with strangers. Why are people wearing them outside when they're not near anybody? Why do people wear them in cars? Neighborhood message boards across the country are filled with complaints like, "I saw a bicyclist without a mask today." The problem is messaging from the top. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention coronavirus guru, is the man we all look to for direction. In March, he said there's no reason to be walking around with a mask. Now he's gung-ho. Yet his mask instruction is very convoluted. He wore a mask to throw out the first pitch at the opening day game of the Nationals park while standing more than 60 feet away from the nearest person. He sat down in the stands with his wife and friend, and they all took turns wearing and removing their masks. In restaurants in New York, when they're open, you got to wear a mask to your seat, but then you can take it off to eat, drink, and talk, which is clearly where all the danger lies. I could go on. You could go on. I'll wager, like I said, I'll wager you still see today, after all this time, brain-dead zombies wearing masks in their own damn cars with the windows up. Don't you shake your head and say out loud, "You stupid damn morons," when you see them? I do. And just as Demorat Governor Andrew Cuomo should, in my opinion, be tried on 11,000 plus counts of manslaughter for pushing hot, infected Wuhan 19 patients into nursing homes where the very weakest in society live in tight quarters with the least trained staff and the least equipped staff, Demorat Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer on August 3rd vetoed a bill from the GOP-controlled legislature that would have shifted elderly people from COVID-19 or with COVID-19 away from nursing homes and into entirely separate facilities. What do we know about COVID-19? 50% of the deaths have been from the elderly. So I got to continue to ask, just what is it about the nature of Demorats makes them so ignorant, so naive, or are they just dangerously evil? I say there's a special kind of hell that exists for people like that. Here's what we know about 2020 elections in the time of Wuhan 19. OMB cannot be afforded any win whatsoever. The two states with the greatest ability to impede any effort of President Trump's are, in fact, New York and California, always spelled it with a K. Thusly, the California story here should be surprising no one. LA Teachers Union calls to defund the police, cap charter schools as part of COVID-19 reopening plan. The second largest teachers union in the U.S. called to defund the police and place a moratorium on charter schools in a research paper recommending that Los Angeles City schools stay closed at the beginning of the fall semester. United Teachers Los Angeles released its study on school reopenings on July 9th, recommending that schools only open once a set of safety precautions and funding conditions are met. On Monday, the Los Angeles and San Diego school districts announced they would not reopen in the near future. So again, I say, it ain't about the coronavirus. It's about whatever amount of power, control, money, the CTA, the California Teachers Association, and the NEA, the National Education Association, can possibly acquire. It's Cloward Piven. It's Alinsky. It's the perfect storm. It's never let a good crisis go to waste. And why shouldn't it be a total power grab? I know this is an aside, but hell, it's my show, and I get to wander. The state of California wants your children. Your parents don't deserve them. You parents don't deserve your kids. You can't be trusted, and you can't be counted on. You parents won't do the right thing and prioritize sex, race and sex, sex and race. You don't get ahead in a leftist society by prioritizing stupid things like history and math and science and English. So parental control in California, always spelled with a K, has to go. We got a woke child mob agenda to further, so get out of the damn way, parents. Which means that private schools got to go. Charter schools got to go. Homeschooling got to go. Which is really odd because, think about it, ask questions. That Wuhan 19 thingy has proven that a lot of teachers are damn near superfluous now. Because 100, 200, 300, 1,000 students can be taught over the internet by one teacher and a really good software program. Simultaneously, homeschooling is exploding. Charter schools are being created and enrolled, and the NEA and the CTA are watching their power dribble away. Hence, well, teaching in California, always spelled with a K, isn't about your kids. It's about the teachers. Come on, get with the program. Literally, get with the program. So what is it? What about the kids themselves?
Dr. Bob Hamilton. I'm a pediatrician from Santa Monica, California. I've been in private practice there for 36 years. And today I have good news for you. The good news is that children, as a general rule, are taking this virus very, very well. Few are getting infected. Those who are getting infected are being hospitalized in low numbers.
Stop. Can you find this video right now? I dare you.
And fortunately, the mortality rate of children is about 1/5 of 1%. So kids are tolerating the infection very frequently.
1/5 of 1%.
They're actually asymptomatic. I also want to say that children are not the drivers of this pandemic. People were worried about initially if children were going to actually be the ones to push the infection along. The very opposite is happening. Kids are tolerating it very well. They're not passing it on to their parents. They're not passing it on to their teachers. Dr. Mark Woolhouse from Scotland, who is a pediatric infectious disease specialist and epidemiologist, said the following. He said, there has not been one documented case of COVID being transferred from a student to a teacher in the world. In the world. I think that is important that all of us who are here today realize that our kids are not really the ones who are driving the infection. It is being driven by older individuals. And yes, we can send the kids back to school, I think, without fear. And this is the big issue right now, as Congressman Norman alluded to. This is the really important thing we need to do. We need to normalize the lives of our children. How do we do that? We do that by getting them back in the classroom. And the good news is they're not driving this infection at all. Yes, we can use security measures. Yes, we can be careful. I'm all for that. We all are. But I think the important thing is we need to not act out of fear. We need to act out of science. We need to do it. We need to get it done.
We don't need to act out of fear. We need to act out of science. What is tonight's show about? It's about exactly that. Why are we still in a lockdown? Where's the science?
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick Ubellis as host and C.S. Bennett co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York. The Lid himself, Jeff Dunnett. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunnett.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Good evening. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show is featured on the SHR Media Network every Tuesday and Thursday night for 2 hours at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. Whilst manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ continues to radically change the world of leftists, one diaper at a time. Stop balancing your checkbooks. Stop cleaning your fish tanks. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show is your magnet for truth, justice, obesity, a darkened studio, and late-night freedom. No United States of America freedoms were abridged in the making of this ad.
This is Shannon Wright.
And this is Michael Wright.
Reminding you to listen
to The Right Way with Shannon and Mike.
Every Monday through Thursday.
7 to 9 a.m.
Right here on SHRmedia.com.
Join me, Jack Alexander, for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense Elite radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian, Sackheads Clint, plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty void in Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show. I am the one and only anointed BZ right here, one each, in all my bulbosity, right here in this seat. Go ahead and you say that 2 times, huh? Hey, hit share on YouTube. Hit share on Spreaker. Be a sharing MFer all the way. My Sharona. And I'm back. Tonight, it's all about the SHR Media special report, the coronavirus. Why are we still in lockdown? Where's the science? I just played Dr. Hamilton saying, kids are not going to die of all of this stuff. Get them back to school. So that brings me back to California. We spell it with a K. And Wuhan 19 from our capital's leftist organ, the Sacramento Bee. It never saw an article that it didn't want to put an opinion piece into, because it does. An op-ed page in every paragraph, in every story. That's the Sacramento Bee. Read it today. California COVID-19 data glitch interferes with contact tracing. A school reopening waivers. A major COVID-19 data glitch in California means counties don't know how many residents have tested positive in recent days, suddenly making it hard to gauge their success in battling the coronavirus. Am I the only one, by the way, I should point out, that takes that little Google tracking for the coronavirus off their phones? Because I do. And while I'm out of here and I'm not expecting a phone call, by the way, my phone is off. Ain't that weird? The computer problem, which is blocking case data from getting to the state and to counties, is inhibiting local officials from tracking infection spread and could stall Governor Newsom's plans to let some elementary schools open. As if Newsom was planning to open schools, right?
Well, isn't that special? Well, isn't that special?
Here's a study that I told you about that emerged from the Henry Ford Health System, which you didn't hear about, which the American media maggots kept quiet. Treatment with hydroxychloroquine cut death rates significantly in COVID-19 patients, Henry Ford Health System study shows. Oh, that article was killed rapidly. Detroit. Treatment with hydroxychloroquine cut the death rate significantly in sick patients hospitalized with COVID-19 and without heart-related side effects, according to a new study published by Henry Ford Health System. In a large-scale retrospective analysis of 2,541 patients hospitalized between March 10th and May 2nd, 2020, across the system's 6 hospitals, the study found 13% of those treated with hydroxychloroquine alone died, compared to 26.4% not treated with hydroxychloroquine. None of the patients had documented serious heart abnormalities. However, patients were monitored for heart condition routinely pointed to as a reason to avoid the drug as treatment for COVID-19. Would it surprise you to know that when I went to this article, because I immure all this stuff, I bookmark all this stuff, this show has taken me 5 months to prepare. So would it surprise you to know that when I came back to this article, there's a YouTube video once embedded in that story, it's no longer available and it's been pulled out. It's been removed. Plus this good news. Henry Ford Health System is currently also involved in a prophylactic hydroxychloroquine study. Will hydroxychloroquine impede or prevent COVID-19 or whip COVID-19? The study is a 3,000-person randomized, double-blinded look at whether hydroxychloroquine prevents health care and frontline workers from contracting the COVID-19 virus. So, like I do before, because I speak leftist, please let me translate for the brain-addled leftists amongst you. That means the study showed treatment with hydroxychloroquine cut death rates in half in the sickest Wuhan 19 patients. Hey, leftists, aren't you glad that I translate for you? Let me also state, because I value clarity and honesty, that the entire leftist Demorat reason they are against hydroxychloroquine is because, again, as I said, President Trump advocated for its use. Now, had he eschewed its utilization, and this is no joke, and I'm sure you know this is true, you can rest assured the rest of the leftist sphere would be massively advocating hydroxychloroquine and say, I don't know, aspirin or dog turds if President Trump hated it. How about some more stats? That's what we discover about Florida. What did we discover about Florida in August? Let's take a closer look at Sarasota County over the last 30 days. According to the U.S. Census, Sarasota County in Florida was inhabited by 433,000 souls as of July 1st, 2019. Here are the numbers according to the Florida COVID-19 dashboard. Just follow the link and click on Sarasota County. 5,974 Sarasotans tested positive since the 1st of July 7th, to be precise. That's 1.3% of the total county population. Hospitalized, 360, which represents 0.08%. How about deaths? 160. That's roughly consistent with the number of deaths recorded statewide. 0.036%. Well, what about neighboring Manatee County, seat of the city of Bradenton and winter home of the Pittsburgh Pirates? Manatee is a slightly smaller population than Sarasota, weighing in with 413,000 people, happy inhabitants. 8,956 Manatee maniacs tested positive for COVID-19, 2.1%. More have been hospitalized, 589, which represents 0.14%. The death count is 189, or 0.045%. And then, as the Spectator indicates, here's why I call it fear porn. Here are the falsehoods that people in the UK and the United... Here's what people believe. Here's what people have come to believe because the American media maggots yell it at them all the time, along with every Karen or every Herald, pick your sex. People in the UK and the United States have come to believe this. In a recent Keck's CNC poll, British respondents estimated that nearly 7% of the UK population has died from the coronavirus. That'd be about 4.5 million people. Scots supposed that more than 10% of the UK population had died. I don't know, maybe that was wishful thinking on their part. That'd be 7 million people. Astonishingly, Americans believe that COVID has killed 9% of the population, or almost 30 million people. You can't believe the stats from Dr. Fauci. You can't believe the CDC. More stories about that. You can't believe the stats from government. They have all, one time or another, been caught fabricating data, covering up data, not mentioning salient data, or outright lying about data. This is from the New York Post. Cuomo and his health department at odds over total New York COVID-19 deaths. This is from August 5th. Governor Andrew Cuomo and his own health department are at odds over how many New Yorkers have died from the coronavirus. The governor reported 25,179 COVID-related fatalities in New York State. The state health department said in issuing an emergency directive on Wednesday that more than 32,000 Empire State residents have died from the killer bug. One thing we know, 11,000 plus elderly have been killed. The bulk of those, like I said, over a third, were killed when Governor Cuomo mandated that hot Wuhan 19 patients be placed in nursing facilities containing the elderly, a group of individuals least capable of fending off a virus in facilities poorly staffed, poorly equipped, and in many homes where 10 or more weak elderly patients occupy one room. How do I know that? I've seen it. We've worried about vaccinations. Would they be effective? What would be placed in them? Trackers? Is that technologically possible? Well, yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. Is it being considered for Africa? Would they be mandatory? Well, yes, those are designed right now for utilization in Africa. What if there was a vaccine? And what if people said, you got to take it? What if you said no? This is from News 10 San Diego, in California, always spell it with a K, .com. States have authority to fine or jail people who refuse coronavirus vaccine, attorney says. This is from August 7th. This is relatively recent. The legal precedent dates back to 1905. So as drug makers race to develop a vaccine amongst the coronavirus, several legal questions are emerging. Could the government require people to get it? Could people who refuse to roll up their sleeves get banned from stores or lose their jobs? Well, the short answer is yes, according to Dow Fox, a law professor and the director of the Center for Health, Law, Policy, and Bioethics at the University of San Diego. Quote, states can compel vaccinations in more or less intrusive ways, he said in an interview. They can limit access to schools or services or jobs if people don't get vaccinated. They could force them to pay a fine or even lock them up in jail. What if technically it's not mandatory, but you won't be allowed into grocery stores until you're proven clean by way of vaccine? That's what I'm asking. You won't be allowed into banks? You won't be allowed into stores? Repair personnel can't come to your home until you're proven clear by way of vaccine? Although states would have the authority to mandate vaccinations, there's more doubt as to whether or not Congress could enact a federal requirement. The most likely federal vaccination requirements would come in the form of maybe a tax penalty. But Fox said, given the current composition of the Supreme Court, a federal vaccine requirement would likely be found unconstitutional. And that's about the time that I say, that's another reason that having responsible jurists on SCOTUS is an absolute damned imperative, wouldn't you say?
Welcome back to Morning Rush at 6:25. Several claims are popping up online as we get closer and closer to a potential COVID-19 vaccine There have been questions about whether states have the authority to mandate vaccines and enforce them with fines or jail time. Our Verify team breaks it down.
On social media, there's a lot of talk about a COVID-19 vaccine. And the Verify team just wants to make sure we're sticking to the facts. Maybe you've seen posts online claiming that states can fine or jail you if you refuse a vaccine. So let's verify. Do states have the authority to fine or jail you under a 1905 Supreme Court decision?
My name is Lawrence Gostin. My name is Peter Myers.
Here are our sources. Law experts from the George Washington University Law School and Georgetown University's Law Center both pointed us towards that landmark 1905 decision, Jacobson v. Massachusetts.
I think that case is still good law, even though it's like over 100 years old.
Here's the background of the case. In 1902, Cambridge, Massachusetts passed a regulation which required residents to get a vaccine for smallpox, threatening a fine for those who didn't. A man named Henning Jacobson refused to get the vaccine, taking the case all the way to the Supreme Court. In the end, the court ruled that these mandatory vaccinations and punishments are allowed under law. Our expert, Gostin, says that this decision has since been validated numerous times.
States are empowered by the Constitution to mandate vaccinations.
But our experts emphasize, even though this would be legal, it remains unlikely.
That's not how we enforce vaccine laws today. There are no criminal statutes in the states mandating children or adults get the flu vaccine, for example.
Our experts also point out that there would be some meaningful exemptions. People who have medical issues like an allergy or a low immune system. Plus, most states have added exemptions for people with religious or philosophical objections to vaccinations. But generally speaking, we can verify states do have the authority to mandate a vaccination and fine and jail you if you refuse it.
Okay, but that also begs the question, what about Australia? What about is happening in Australia right now? I don't have time to take all of the information and all the questions, but Jack and I are going to be speaking about that this coming Thursday here in the Saloon. Just thought I'd tell you about that. And a coronavirus vaccine should be mandatory, and tax penalties, higher insurance premiums, and denial of many government and private services ought to be considered for those refusing the shot. 2 doctors and an attorney argued in USA Today. What about masks? Well, you've all heard the SKA, the shrill Karen army of mask Nazis. Here's an article from fee.org. Europe's top health officials say masks aren't helpful in beating COVID-19. Okay, if I had a producer, what you would have heard is masks are not efficient in beating COVID-19. But I don't have a producer, so that's not what you heard. Top medical experts in the world can't decide if masks are helpful in reducing the spread of COVID-19 or just make things worse. Denmark boasts one of the lowest COVID-19 death rates in the world. As of August 4th, the Danes have suffered 616 COVID-19 deaths, according to figures from Johns Hopkins University. That's less than 1/3 of the number of Danes who die from pneumonia or influenza in a given year. Now, despite this success, Danish leaders recently found themselves on the defensive. The reason is the reason is that Danes aren't wearing face masks, and local authorities, for the most part, aren't even recommending them. This prompted Berlingske, the country's oldest newspaper, to complain that Danes had positioned themselves to the right of Donald Trump. The whole world is wearing face masks, even Donald Trump, Berlingske, the newspaper, pointed out. This apparently didn't sit well with Danish health officials. They responded by noting there is little conclusive evidence that face masks are an effective way to limit the spread of respiratory viruses. Ooh, ouch. Bada bing, bada boom. That's got to hurt. Dutch public health officials recently explained why they're not recommending masks. Quote, from a medical point of view, there is no evidence of a medical effect of wearing face masks, so we decided not to impose a national obligation, said Medical Care Minister Tamara van Ark. I'm sure you heard this story. And all about the state of Denmark and masks, right? Right? No? I don't get it. Wait, what about Dr. Fauci's position on masks that happened to be in March?
Among people and misinformation surrounding face masks. Can you discuss that?
The masks are important for someone who's infected to prevent them from infecting someone else. Now, when you see
the masks are important. Remember, the masks are important, especially when you get into a squad car.
People, and look at the films in China and South Korea, whatever, everybody's wearing a mask. Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
What?
When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet.
It's emotional? Is that what you're saying, Dr. Fauci? It's all about leftist little preening emotion.
But it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. Ooh. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare.
I haven't heard this video in a while, so I'm going to have to start using that word. That's the technical term, schmutz.
Providers needing them and people who are ill. The people who, when you look at the films of foreign countries and you see 85% of the people wearing masks, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not against it. If you want to do it, that's fine.
But it can lead to a shortage of masks.
Exactly. That's the point. It could lead to a shortage of masks for the people who really need it.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's Dr. Fauci. That's the revered Dr. Fauci. Now, the CDC comes into play here. In late February, early March, here is what the official CDC line was at the time. Take it away. Coronavirus disease, COVID-19. Question, should I wear a mask to protect myself from COVID-19? What was the CDC's answer at the time? CDC does not currently recommend the use of face masks among the general public. Some people who have an increased risk of exposure may need additional precautions, such as healthcare professionals caring for COVID-19 patients and other close contacts. Then in May of 2020, this came out from the New England Journal of Medicine. Universal masking in hospitals in the COVID-19 era, May 21st of 2020. We know that wearing a mask outside healthcare facilities offers little, if any, protection from infection. Public health authorities define a significant exposure to COVID-19 as face-to-face contact within 6 feet with a patient with symptomatic COVID-19 that is sustained for at least a few minutes, and some say more than 10 minutes or even 30 minutes. The chance of COVID-19 catching COVID-19 from a passing interaction in a public space is therefore minimal. In many cases, the desire for widespread masking is a reflexive reaction to anxiety over the pandemic. Then there's some more truth.
Some facts versus the media lies, the panic porn lies that you're getting fed still. And what I'm about to share with you,
this is Steve Deese.
All of this is data as of 5 p.m. Eastern time yesterday. So close of business yesterday. All of this data from close of business on Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. All right? And I want you to just sit back and watch as we put things into perspective for you. And you've been told this is the worst this has been the whole time. It just keeps getting worse. It's worse than it was in March and April and May, right? Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry I don't have time to play that video because I got a motor on. But take that to heart. Let's see, I got about 2 or 3 more minutes. Right about now, I'd like to take this point to illuminate some obvious disparities if you ask questions. Despite having the strictest mask mandates in the United States, Hawaii happens to have seen Wuhan 19 cases explode. And remember all along in the first and and earlier in the second hour now, I said, we're going somewhere with this. I'm going somewhere with this. Ask questions. Ask questions. Always ask questions. Hawaii has some of the strictest mask mandates in the United States. On the other hand, haven't you thought about this? I have. Look at Africa. Look at South Africa. Everybody expected Wuhan 19 to have its way with the entire continent, to turn it into a massive quagmire of infections and death. No such thing. I think there are a bunch of reasons why. Not just one, but a number of them. One of the major reasons is hydroxychloroquine is still prescribed in masses there against malaria. There aren't many old folks in Africa and South Africa. People live together in many places, cheek to jowl, in conditions that are not the finest in terms of sanitation. Part of that creates an inherent immunity against much of what the rest of the world faces. People may already have various degrees of immunity against the Rona. But in America, look around, think about this. We've dropped our immunities. We scrub and we wash and we sanitize with hundreds of different available liquids and gels. Kids stay inside. They don't interact with the outdoors like they used to. They don't want to go out. They don't even have gym classes anymore. I submit that as a culture, we're not even building up and reinforcing our immunities. Parents think they're doing good. I submit they may not be. As I wrote a while ago, you know what? It's called an immune system. Try using it. You were issued one. You either killed it or you actually kept it warm for a while. Which one did you do?
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Southern Sense is conservative talk with Annie, the radio chick you bellows as host, and C.S. Bennett, co-host. Informative, fun, irreverent, and politically incorrect. You never know where they'll go, but you'll love the journey. Annie is a top conservative host on Top Talk Radio and features some of the finest guests packed with important politicians and newsmakers. Listen every Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern, noon to 3 Pacific, on the SHR Media Network. Remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
It's your business diva here, Melanie Collette. I am inviting you to a front row seat as I discuss some of the most intriguing details of wealth and finance with today's movers and shakers in the world of business. Listen in and discover financial truths on a global, domestic, and household scale. Uncover topics that will impact your wallet today and in the future. Money Talk with Melanie airs Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. East, 2 p.m. West, right here on SHR Media and High Plains Pundit Talk Radio. You can't afford to miss it.
From a public locker inside a dilapidated Long Island rail station comes a show designed to piss off liberals using truth, facts, and ridicule. The Lid Radio Show, featuring the conservative voice from the People's Republic of New York. The Lid himself, Jeff Dunnett. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific on the SHR Media Network. Go to shrmedia.com. At Lid Radio, we fight for the truth, justice, and a good kosher T-bone. If you don't listen, Hillary Clinton might sneak into your bedroom in her housecoat late at night and blame you for her election loss. It's the Lid Radio Show with Jeff Dunnett.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Good evening. Broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, the bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show is featured on the SHR Media Network every Tuesday and Thursday night for 2 hours at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. Whilst manufacturers are running out of metal for the diapers of the leftists, BZ continues to radically change the world of leftists, one diaper at a time. Stop balancing your checkbooks. Stop cleaning your fish tanks. The bloviating Zeppelin's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show is your magnet for truth, justice, obesity, a darkened studio, and late-night freedom. No United States of America freedoms were abridged in the making of this ad.
This is Shannon Wright.
And this is Michael Wright.
Reminding you to listen
to The Right Way with Shannon and Mike.
Every Monday through Thursday.
7 to 9 a.m.
Right here on
SHRmedia.com.
Join me, Jack Alexander, for the Jack Alexander Experiment podcast, as I take a unique outsider's look at the issues affecting the USA. I fearlessly take on the issues that everyone else is too scared to touch. The Jack Alexander Experiment podcast is available wherever good podcasts can be found, like Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcast. The Jack Alexander Experiment, because it's not a matter of left versus right, it's a matter of right versus wrong.
After 6 years covering terror and corruption, the Unpleasant Blind Guy is making a change. I'm Dave Milner. Join me on Spreaker and YouTube through SHR Media and on the Western Free Radio Network as I team up with Jeff Mitchell, host of the English Defense League radio show on blogtalkradio.com. Check show pages for airtimes. It's the Unpleasant Blind Guy.
On EDL Radio.
There's
no surrender, ever.
Because truth is not always pleasant.
Featuring the effervescent contrarian sackheads Clint plus the unrestrained bulbosity of BZ, the Sackheads Against Tyranny is a real chat show. Doubling your late-night conservative talk show pleasure with double the hosts, you can listen every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. Please note, some contents may have settled during shipping. Member FDIC, batteries not included, warranty void in Montenegro.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to the beginning of the third hour of BZ's Berserk, Bobcat, Saloon radio show. I'm losing people in chat one by one because it's kind of a long show. It's an SHR Media special report, Coronavirus. Why are we still locked down? Where's the science? If you haven't yet, I would greatly appreciate it if you could hit share on everything that you're watching. YouTube, Spreaker, anything. Hit share, pretty please, etc. You want a bombshell? Here was a bombshell by the CDC not long ago, August. New CDC report says 94% of COVID deaths had underlying conditions. Only 6% died from COVID alone. Oh, the leftists and the Demorats and the American media maggots all went 210 over 190 when that came out. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued a new report detailing how many COVID-19 deaths in America also involved other underlying health conditions. Isn't that what we were told about the elderly folks? Well, yeah. And who's subject to it? Well, you got to be old and ancient like me with a ton of comorbidities like me. According to the report, 6% of the COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. list COVID-19 as the only cause of death. 94% of COVID-19 deaths involved at least one other underlying health condition, and on average involve 2.6 additional conditions or causes of death. That's on the CDC page. By the way, I might do a show on this sometime, just not yet. Are you aware that the CDC is not an independent agency? It is a vaccine company, essentially. The CDC owns over 20 vaccine patents. It sells about $4.6 billion of vaccines every year. That's from RFK Jr. That, too, was removed by the American media maggots, who can be counted on, like cats, to cover up shit that doesn't fulfill and enhance their anti-Trump agendas of Trump über alles interferen. Leftists, Demorats, and American media maggots all labeled that as twisted, skewed bullshit. Funny thing, though, Minnesota State Senator Dr. Scott Jensen already spoke about the official CDC Wuhan 19 death guidelines back in April. He let the cat out of the bag, and he paid a price for that. And the financial incentives involved. We talked about that earlier. Financial incentives involved. Huh?
If someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death.
No, I can't imagine if someone comes in with coronavirus, goes to an ICU, and they have an underlying heart condition and they die, they're going to say cause of death, heart attack. I cannot see that happening.
Yeah.
That was from yesterday's White House briefing, and it sparked a nationwide debate over how we count deaths from COVID-19. Do we count someone who tests positive for the virus but died of pneumonia as a COVID death? But what about someone who dies with symptoms of the disease but was actually never tested? It's actually crucial information. COVID death stats inform the models that guide federal and state governments' responses to the crisis. It's really important. Now, Italy, very interesting, has been grappling with this same debate for weeks. I mentioned it 2 weeks ago. I'll mention it again. Here's what the Daily Telegraph reported. According to Professor Walter Ricciardi, is the scientific advisor to Italy's Minister of Health. This is what he said. He said, the way in which we code deaths in our country is very generous in the sense that all people who die in hospitals with the coronavirus are deemed to be dying of the coronavirus. On reevaluation by the National Institute of Health, only 12.
Oh, it depends on what the meaning of is. Oh. It depends on what the meaning of with and of are. Oh, and throw in money.
12% of death certificates have shown a direct causality from coronavirus, while 88% of patients who have died have at least one premorbidity. Many had 2 or 3. My next guest is a doctor and state senator in Minnesota who is deeply troubled by the CDC's latest guidance for counting COVID deaths. Dr. Scott Jensen joins me now. Doctor, I want to read for our viewers what the CDC says in part about how to count COVID deaths relating to that last issue we just raised. In cases where a definite diagnosis of COVID cannot...
Okay, let me clue you in. She's speaking to a dude named Dr. Scott Jensen. He is a Minnesota state senator, so he's both things. He's a politician, and he's a doctor, and he's also practicing.
...not be made, but is suspected or likely, like the circumstances are compelling with a reasonable degree of certainty.
So he deals with that stuff. He deals with it. That's his job.
It is acceptable to report COVID-19 on a death certificate as probable or presumed. So, doctor, what's the problem with that?
Well, in short, it's ridiculous. I spent some time earlier today just going through the CDC's manual on how to complete death certificates and the parts that were specifically written for physicians. And in that manual, it talks of precision and specificity, and that's what we were trained with. The determination of the cause of death is a big deal. It has impact on estate planning. It has impact on future generations. And the idea that we're going to allow people to massage and sort of game the numbers is a real issue, because we're going to undermine the trust. And right now, as we see politicians doing things that aren't necessarily motivated on fact and science, the public's their trust in politicians is already wearing thin.
And doctor, in that same CDC guidance sheet on COVID-19, it references the fact that basically this is a judgment call for doctors on how to fit. I read it, what goes on line 1, and then what goes on line 2, and what goes on the final line as far as contributing factors and ultimate cause of death. But they concede that it is a judgment call. Again, why is that not correct?
Well, let's just take influenza. If I have a patient died a month ago, had fever, cough, and died after 3 days, and maybe had been an elderly, fragile individual, and there happened to be an influenza epidemic around our community, I wouldn't put influenza on the death certificate, and I've never been encouraged to do so. I would put probably respiratory arrest would be the top line, and the underlying cause of disease would be pneumonia. And in the contributing factors, I might well put emphysema or congestive heart failure. But I would never put influenza down as the underlying cause of death. And yet that's what we're being asked to do here.
Dr. Fauci was
from the CDC. Directions, guidelines from the CDC.
Asked about the COVID death count today. Here's what he said in part.
What do you say to those folks who are making the claim without really any evidence that these deaths are being padded, that the number of COVID-19 deaths are being padded?
Oh, no. You will always have conspiracy theories when you have very challenging public health crises. They are nothing but distractions.
Conspiracy theories, Doctor? So you're engaging in conspiracy theories. What do you say to Dr. Fauci tonight?
Damn it.
Well, I would remind him that anytime healthcare intersects with dollars, it gets awkward. Right now, Medicare has determined that if you have a COVID-19 admission to the hospital, you'll get paid $13,000. If that COVID-19 patient goes on a ventilator, you get $39,000, 3 times as much. Nobody can tell me after 35 years in the world of medicine that sometimes those kinds of things impact on what we do. Some physicians really have a bent towards public health, and they will put down influenza or whatever because that's their preference. I try to stay very specific, very precise. If I know I've got pneumonia, that's what's going on, the death certificate. I'm not going to add stuff just because it's convenient. I think that it's not a conspiracy theory at all.
So you reject what he said?
Absolutely.
Well, it's interesting that in Italy, where it's socialized medicine, I guess they don't have an interest in the money, if that's what it is here, and they just went back and they started reclassifying deaths according to their top scientific advisor. So they admitted that they were being liberal or generous in how they coded some of these deaths, and they're just going back and reclassifying them. Does that surprise you?
It really does. I mean, let's just take someone getting hit by a bus and they collapse along and they go into the emergency room and they're there for 15, 20 minutes. Blood work comes back, COVID test comes back positive, and they die 20 minutes later because of their collapsed lung. We're going to put that down as COVID-19? That doesn't make any sense.
How
Dr.
many
Jensen,
did?
Really important conversation. We really, really appreciate your data-driven perspective. Thank you so much.
Imagine that. But see, clear-thinking individuals were already suspecting that. That's why I say ask questions all the time, you tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists. Then there's this. What a wonderful article from AIER.org. Guaranteed you haven't heard of this article. Like I said, I spent 3 or 4 months, 5 months, scouring the internet for this show and put it all together here. Guaranteed you haven't heard of this article because the first paragraph says it all, and the leftists and the Demorats and the American media maggots are certainly not going to tolerate this article. Jeffrey Tucker wrote, "The virus doesn't care about your policies. Based on the data, there seems to be no relationship between lockdowns and lives saved. That's remarkable given that we know for sure that lockdowns have destroyed economies the world over. Every epidemic model being flung around in March built in the assumption that lockdowns would control the virus. In the early days, it was about preserving hospital capacity. Later, it became a general principle, slow the spread. The methods were the same in nearly every country. Ban large gatherings, close schools, shutter businesses, enforce stay-home orders, mandate human separation, masks, travel restrictions. Nothing like this has ever been tried in the entire history of humanity, certainly not on this scale. You might suppose, then, there was absolute certainty that there would be a causal relationship between lockdowns and the trajectory of the virus. Just as the FDA doesn't approve a drug unless it's proven to be safe and effective, one might suppose the same would be true for a policy that shattered every routine and trampled human rights in the name of disease mitigation. Surely you would think that. It turns out not to be the case. It was pure speculation that lockdowns would suppress this virus, and that speculation was based on a hubristic presumption of the awesome power and intelligence of government managers, who, I'm adding, by their very nature are not intelligent. They are, however, political, and remember this. In an election year, everything is about the election. He continues, for 5 months, governments all over the world have been freaking out ordering people around to do this and do that, passing mandate after mandate, and yet there is no evidence that any of it matters to the virus. Already in mid-April, questions arose. Professor Isaac Ben Israel, head of the Security Studies program at Tel Aviv University and the chairman of the National Council for Research and Development, looked at the data around the world. Data, science, data, and concluded the virus comes and goes after 70 days regardless of the policies deployed. He found no relationship at all between locking down and transmission and death. Now, fast forward to mid-July. Data scientists investigated the experience from the spring. They too found no relationship between the virus and policy. Putting it very bluntly, quote, rapid border closures, full lockdowns, and widespread testing were not associated with COVID-19 mortality per million people. That's awesome to consider. Billions of lives fundamentally altered, economies wrecked, centuries-old traditions of liberty and law thrown out, police states everywhere, and to what end? The data indicates it was all for naught. Apparently, you can't control a virus with state policies. The virus just doesn't seem to care. So Tucker concluded, at some point, we're going to have to throw in the towel. Whether a country locks down or stays open has as much predictive power over deaths per million as whether it rains today is related to the color of my socks, or whether hurricanes are controlled by literacy rates. In other words, the claim that lockdowns control viruses is pseudoscience or magical thinking of a deeply dangerous sort. It wrecks economies and lives. Now, to be sure, there are plenty of studies claiming that lockdowns save lives, but the high-profile ones are model-based extrapolations that presume the existence of a relationship that the facts do not seem to back up. If there is a broad-based research study using real data that demonstrates something life-saving about destroying rights and liberties in the name of virus control, I've yet to see it. Meanwhile, we're overwhelmed with evidence that it was all pointlessly destructive. Liberty means the practice of health and wealth. Lockdowns lead to exactly what D.A. Henderson predicted. Catastrophe. We'll talk about this more on Thursday. Australia, the land of freedom since 1996, says this about hydroxychloroquine. Queensland government bans taking hydroxychloroquine as a preventive measure for COVID-19 and imposes a $1,334 fine and 6 months jail. Then I had to dig deep for this. Jack. This is, I don't even know if this is going to play. This is from Sky News Australia. I hope it's still strong enough to allow me to play this.
2 words that should put the fear of God into every politician in this country, every highly paid bureaucrat. But first, 2 words that should put the fear of God into every politician in this country, every highly paid bureaucrat, every chief medical officer, every health administrator, and every unemployed man and woman now looking at lives shattered, careers devastated, dreams obliterated, and futures destroyed. 2 words that are also 2 European countries, Sweden and Switzerland. Let's start with Sweden. 4 months ago, we interviewed on Outsiders Professor Johan Giesecke, the former state epidemiologist for Sweden and the mentor to Anders Tegnell, who has been in charge of Sweden's controversial response to COVID-19. On that show, which any politician in Australia could have chosen to watch, Professor Johan Giesecke spelt out in crystal clear detail that you could not eradicate the coronavirus, you could only slow it down, and that the only people that should be quarantined were the elderly and the vulnerable as a preventative measure. A major lockdown, he warned, such as they did in the UK and we are now seeing in Victoria and New Zealand, he warned would simply leave the population without herd immunity, so permanently vulnerable, and in the process completely destroy our economies. Let me now quote from Friday's editorial in the UK Telegraph, not some crazy conspiracy rag, but one of Britain's most respected newspapers.
Listen to this.
Here's what they said. So now we know Sweden got it largely right and the British establishment catastrophically wrong. Anders Tegnell, Stockholm's epidemiologist king, has pulled off a remarkable triple whammy. Far fewer deaths per capita than Britain, a maintenance of basic freedoms and opportunities, and most strikingly, a recession less than half as severe as our own.
Imagine
our
that.
arrogant quangocrats, says the UK Telegraph editorial, and state experts should hang their heads in shame. Their reaction to coronavirus was one of the greatest public policy blunders in modern history. Millions will lose their jobs, tens of thousands of small businesses are failing, vast numbers are likely to die from untreated or undetected illnesses. Sound familiar? Daniel, Jacinda, Anastasia? Also this week, Dr. Sebastian Rushgrove, a Swedish doctor writing on the Spectator Coffeehouse blog, confirms firsthand the success of the Swedish approach. He writes, all the COVID patients have disappeared. It is now 4 months since the start of the pandemic, and I haven't seen a single COVID patient in over a month, says the Swedish Dr. Rushgrove. At the peak, 3 months back, 100 people were dying a day of COVID in Sweden, a country with a population of 10 million. We are now down to around 5 people dying per day in the whole country, and that number continues to drop. The daily risk per person of getting infected is 1 in 10,000, which is minuscule. Basically, COVID is in all practical senses over and done with in Sweden. After 4 months, Sweden ripped the metaphorical Band-Aid off quickly, he writes, and got the epidemic over and done with in a short amount of time, while the rest of the world has chosen to try to peel the Band-Aid off slowly. COVID is over in Sweden, he writes. People have gone back to their normal lives and barely anyone is getting infected anymore. I am willing to bet, he says, that the countries that...
What he's showing you is, by the way, an article that says COVID-19. Many Swedes and Sweden were pilloried for their stance. They may have the last laugh.
...have shut down completely. We'll see rates spike when they open up. If that is the case, then there won't have been any point in shutting down in the first place. That's Sweden. It appears that the warnings we made on this program before anyone else in Australia may well have been accurate. And then there's Switzerland and the use of the drug hydroxychloroquine, banned in Victoria and Queensland for treating the coronavirus. As I have repeatedly pointed out on this show, there are now dozens of international studies that show the drug used in the correct combination with other drugs and the correct dose, it is effective, including the latest study that shows countries that use hydroxychloroquine early on have a 79% lower COVID-19 mortality rate. But here's the clincher. Switzerland briefly banned the drug after the Lancet claimed it was killing people. That's the medical journal. That study, you'll remember we discussed it here, was completely debunked. And 2 weeks later, the Lancet withdrew the study and immediately Switzerland reinstated the drug. And guess what happened? During the 2 weeks, Switzerland stopped using hydroxychloroquine. Well, according to a study done by Johns Hopkins University, the consequences of suddenly stopping hydroxychloroquine can be seen by examining the case-fatality ratio index for Switzerland. It can be seen that during the weeks preceding the ban on hydroxychloroquine, the index fluctuated between 3 and 5%. But after stopping outpatient hydroxychloroquine use, the country's COVID-19 deaths increased 4 times to the highest level it had been since the pandemic began, oscillating at over 10 to 15%. Then, when early outpatient hydroxychloroquine was reinstated on June the 11th, the fourfold wave of excess lethality rapidly returned back to where it was.
What?
And there are plenty of other reports, such as the one on DocWire News, that says our findings suggest that patients confirmed for COVID-19 infection should be administered HCQ as soon as possible. Or a study from China that says patients treated with HCQ at the time of early hospital recovered faster than those who were treated later, or another study that found that when the drug was given in the first 7 days, the benefits were greatly improved, or this graph that shows the case fatality rate of countries in blue that use or encourage the drug, and in red, the ones that don't. I don't need to spell it out for you. But here's the real joke. I have been denigrated this week by the medical community in Australia for merely reporting this news and discussing hydroxychloroquine use around the world.
You bastard.
Talking about the drug. Bizarrely, the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners magazine attacked me personally as well as federal MP Craig Kelly.
Why not?
You'd think these lefties might actually be worrying about curing COVID patients and protecting the elderly rather than sneering at Sky News presenters and politicians. Still,
I think it's great he calls them lefties.
We really should take our medical practitioners and their lobby groups seriously. I mean, they're the same mob who, as part of the COVID-19 recovery, are urging Scott Morrison to act quickly on climate change. You couldn't make this stuff up. So allow me to remind our political leaders and our media bureaucrats, medical bureaucrats, of two little words that deserve to haunt you in the wee hours of the morning: Sweden and Switzerland. Will history record that not only was the destruction of our economy completely pointless, but preventative treatments such as drugs like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine in combination with others were sitting there right under our noses all along.
Imagine that. That's from #Outsiders. That's a program on Sky News. #Outsiders. Okay, plus, here's information about what's really being done in Australia. The government is creating a DNA database that is being shared with, wait for it, China.
Similarly here, we have a body called the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. And the Australian Strategic Policy Institute looks at contracts and looks at security risks for this country. And you know what they've produced? I'll tell you what they produced. What they produced is a report to identify that the 10 million RT-PCR tests that we got from Chinese company called Beijing Genomics Institute is actually doing a fantastic job of DNA profiling for the Chinese government. They're actually building a police-run DNA database. And I've got all the reports. They're all online. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute warned the government of the security risk of using the RT-PCR tests, the 10 million of them that brought in, okay, for the fact that the BGI is related very strongly to companies that are engaging in DNA dragnets, profiling DNA. That's right. The RT-PCR tests are not so reliable for COVID-19, but they're pretty good at getting your DNA information.
And creating a database. That's going to be shared with China. Worldometer's coronavirus page shows 99% of known causes worldwide, which are only a percentage of actual cases, by the way, are defined as mild. 1% are being serious or critical. And after a rougher start, the death rate is now approaching that of the flu. Why is everyone still panicking? This came out from the wallstreetjournal.com, and I'm going to forego any breaks in the meantime. I just want to let you know where you are right now.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
This is from the wallstreetjournal.com. COVID-19 cases, death rates are declining 6 months into the pandemic. Oh, this is just not long ago. This is September 9th. This isn't something that occurred in March. Medical experts warn against complacency, with some forecasters saying the U.S. COVID death rate and death toll could more than double by January 1st. The U.S. is catching its breath after a punishing 6 months of the coronavirus pandemic, with the daily death toll of COVID-19 declining in the wake of summertime outbreaks in the Sunbelt like states of Florida and Texas. Still, public health authorities and researchers are warning Americans not to let their guard down. The confluence of students mixing once again in classrooms, colder weather in places like the Northeast, and fatigue from long-running pandemic isolation threatens to trigger more cases while driving the deaths upwards. You see how this functions? The Wall Street Journal can't afford to let you feel too good. There has to be a death hammer in there someplace. But notice the current trend. The American media maggots keep mentioning cases, 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 cases. That's just about immaterial. Tell me about, and they don't, hospitalizations, the lack of beds, and the deaths. Oh, wait. You're predominantly not hearing about that. It's because deaths are going down. Nor, again, are you hearing about the related deaths from suicides. Not hearing about that. Mental illness, the ruination of individuals, the ruination of families, the ruination of family businesses, but not big corporations. Oh, no. Walmart, doing just fine. Amazon, doing just fine. Media corporations, doing just fine. Politicians and bureaucrats, doing just fine. Not one job lost. Not one meal missed. Open America up. Oh, now the WHO comes out with something, and they make some kind of an admission.
It still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
I didn't quite get that. Can I hear that one more time? I'm serious. I could not tell what you just said.
From the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
Still didn't quite get that, but Dr. Samadi went to medical school. He's been listening to doctors all of his life. Doctor, I believe the headline from the World Health Organization is asymptomatic people are not infectious. They're not going to spread the disease. Is that what the WHO is saying?
Yes, that's correct, Greg. Look, you and I have been going at this since February of this year. We've covered more than hundreds of these segments on Newsmax TV. The most important segment about what we're going to be talking about COVID is probably tonight, because they're taking a 360-degree turn, and WHO is announcing, and this is a big news, that asymptomatic people out there are not contagious.
Asymptomatic people out there are not contagious, in direct contravention of what you've been told. And as opposed to Joe Biden, who said 200 million Americans died from the coronavirus. And Dr. Fauci said President Trump saved lives.
Dr. Fauci, let me ask you about some of the decisions that you worked with President Trump on, and the whole team did. I know when you go back to the beginning of this, the China ban was very heavily discussed. Were you involved in working with President Trump on deciding to ban flights from China?
Yes, sir, I was.
Do you agree with that decision?
I do.
Do you think that decision saved lives, Dr. Fauci?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with the decision when ultimately we saw spread in Europe and then...
By the way, this is Steve Scalise, minority whip, Republican from Louisiana, from the Subcommittee on Coronavirus Crisis. He's a ranking member there.
The president recommended that we extend that to Europe. Did you participate in that discussion?
I was actively involved in that discussion, sir.
Do you agree with that decision?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that decision saved lives?
Yes, I do.
Eventually, then, we saw the United Kingdom have an outbreak, and there had to be a tough decision made. Do we extend that to the United Kingdom? Were you part of that decision?
I was.
And do you agree with that decision as well?
I do.
Did that decision save lives?
Yes, it did.
When you look at the 15 days to slow the spread, initially it started at 15. Were you part of the decision to implement that decision?
I was very much involved in that.
Did that decision save lives, Dr.
I believe it did.
Then when President Trump met with you and Dr. Birx to extend that another 30 days, do you agree with that decision that President Trump made to extend that?
Yes, I was very much involved, and I agree with it.
Did that decision save lives, Dr. Fauci?
I believe it did.
So I know we've heard a lot about disagreements. Clearly, there are many decisions made. In fact, there are many very internationally respected doctors that are involved in each of those decisions. Is that correct?
Yes.
By and large, would you say that you and President Trump have been in agreement on most of those decisions?
We were in agreement on virtually all of those.
I appreciate that.
But you won't hear that, will you? Because OMB bad. You won't hear that at all. According to, as I indicated, according to presidential candidate Joe Biden, half of America is dead now.
If Donald Trump has his way, the complications from COVID-19, which are well beyond what they should be. It's estimated that 200 million people have died, probably by the time I finish this talk.
That's over half of the United States. Then the good doctor Fauci weighs in again. But is anybody listening? Around this time? No. Anyone on the Republican side? Apparently not. Republicans gathering en masse to protest mail-in ballots. Are they doing that? Which are designed, by the way, to clog the system and derail the presidential election. Are they doing that? Republicans? No. Here's a story that says, well, Fauci says there's no reason Americans can't vote in person in November. That was August 14th. What? Have you heard that?
Can people safely go out and vote in person, given that this year there is so much concern around the vote?
I think if carefully done according to the guidelines, there's no reason that I can see why that not be the case. For example, when you look at going to a grocery store now in many regions and counties and cities that are doing it correctly, they have X's every 6 or more feet. And it says, don't leave this spot until the person in front of you left their spot. And you can do that. If you go and wear a mask, if you observe the physical distancing and don't have a crowded situation, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. I mean, obviously, if you're a person who is compromised physically or otherwise, or you don't want to take the chance, there's the situation of mail-in voting that is done for years in many places. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to vote in person or otherwise.
There's no reason we shouldn't be able to vote in person or otherwise. What should convince everyone? Joe Biden just voted in person. Folks, if Joe Biden can vote in person, anybody can vote in person. Open America up. Close to 1,000 German doctors spoke out against their governments and the WHO's official narrative. Doctors around the world are joining this movement. I don't have time to play the video, but I've got it on hand. But WHO, listen to this. This is really the impetus behind this all. WHO Director Tedros Adhanom says, we cannot go back to the way things were. The COVID-19 pandemic has given a new push to the need to accelerate efforts to respond to climate change. With them, Wuhan 19 isn't about a vaccine. It's about wealth redistribution and fleecing you. The CDC also wrote, because the general public has not received training on proper selection and use of respiratory PPE, it can't be certain whether respiratory PPE worn during contact with an individual with COVID-19 protected them from exposure. They don't know. Open America up. This was kind of fun. I can't not play you this one. This is kind of amusing, I'd have to say.
My apologies. I was wearing my mask because I just got back from a full day of being a good person. I love my mask because it's a simple yet effective way to display my righteousness. Am I concerned that 2 children in China dropped dead because they were forced to wear masks in gym class? Nope. Am I concerned that we're creating a generation of children who will be socially awkward and conditioned to fear their fellow man? No. Am I concerned that I'm contributing to an impending socialist technocracy that will enslave the global population? Not even a little bit. Am I concerned that my mask is symbolic of my compliance to the social conditioning that will eventually lead to the forced vaccination of every man, woman, and child on planet Earth? Not a chance. And why am I not concerned, you ask? I'm not concerned because I decided a long time ago that shallow, insignificant gestures are a much easier way to showcase my morality than actually being moral. Because in order to be a real good person, I gotta stand up to a real bad person. And I don't like standing up to or for anything. I've decided that it's much easier to trick my own mind into thinking compliance is a virtue instead of what compliance actually is: cowardice. I prefer to float through life completely ignorant to the fact that every socialist takeover has always begun in the exact same way, with government overreach, public shaming, censorship, and a toilet paper shortage. Don't believe me? Google toilet paper shortage in communist Russia. Did you think you were having a unique experience? I prefer to pretend history never repeats itself so that I can stand by and turn a blind eye every time history repeats itself. I prefer to call anyone who speaks up, fights back, or stands their ground a lunatic or a conspiracy theorist so that I don't feel obligated to do my own research. Research takes away from me time. And lastly, I prefer to put on my mask and stand among a sea of masks so that I never have to be seen, be free, or reveal the deep dark shadows that lurk within me.
Huh. Haven't you thought about that? The people that are succumbing to fear porn, huddling and quivering in the fetal position under their desks. I know I have. Here's a tale of two governors, Ron DeSantis of Florida and Gavin Newsom of California. Open America up. This is from Revolver News. Revolver exclusive study. COVID-19 lockdowns over 10 times more deadly than the pandemic itself. A groundbreaking new study commissioned by Revolver News concludes that COVID-19 lockdowns are 10 times more deadly than the actual COVID-19 virus in terms of years of life lost by American citizens. Up until this point, there's been no simple, rigorous analysis that accurately and definitely conveys the true costs of the COVID-19 lockdowns. Accordingly, Revolver News set out to commission a study to do precisely that, to finally quantify the net damage of the lockdowns in terms of a metric known as life years. Simply put, we've drawn upon existing economic studies on the health effects of unemployment to calculate an estimate of how many years of life will have been lost due to the lockdowns in the United States, and have weighed this against an estimate of how many years of life will be saved by the lockdowns. The results are nothing short of staggering and suggest the lockdowns will end up costing Americans over 10 times as many years of life as they will save from the virus itself. Where's the science? Why are we still in lockdown? But Joe Biden...
Sworn in come January, and we have coronavirus and the flu combining, which many scientists have said is a real possibility. Would you be prepared to shut this country down again?
We're all going to die.
I would be prepared to do whatever it takes to save lives, because we cannot get the country moving until we control the virus. That is the fundamental flaw of this administration's thinking to begin with. In order to keep the country running and moving and the economy growing and people employed, you have to fix the virus. You have to deal with the virus.
So if the scientists say, shut it down?
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists.
Okay, and if you shut it down, you want to keep people employed. How is that keeping people employed, Joe? I'm going to repeat again. 99.5% of people... By the way, I said I was going to refer you to a video of Ron DeSantis. Basically, he was going to tell you that Florida, he's not going to lock down Florida again. In the meantime, in the time that it took me to find a place to embed that video's gone. That's from this afternoon until now. So I can't play Ron DeSantis. But let's go back to the facts. 99.5% of people are not going to be hospitalized from Wuhan 19. And yet we're bankrupting people, ruining families, killing businesses, and geometrically increasing suicides. Open America up. Even the New York Times revealed your coronavirus test is positive. Maybe it shouldn't be. The usual diagnostic tests may simply be too sensitive and too slow to contain the spread of the virus. Some of the nation's leading public health experts are raising a new concern in the endless debate over coronavirus testing in the United States. The standard tests are diagnosing huge numbers of people who may be carrying relatively insignificant amounts of the virus. But wait, I thought we were told it's all about cases, and that's why we're doomed. What if the cases aren't really bad cases after all? What if they're pretty much negligible? And the New York Post, once again, gets into questioning things. Oh, damn you guys. Never question. It's now looking like the lockdown may have been a huge mistake. Were lockdowns a mistake? To that nagging question, the answer increasingly seems to be yes. Certainly they were a novelty. As novelist Lionel Shriver writes, we've never before responded to a contagion by closing down whole countries. As I've noted, the 1957-58 Asian flu killed about 70,000 and 100,000 or 116,000 Americans, between 0.04% and 0.07% of the nation's population. The 1968-70 Hong Kong flu killed about 100,000, 0.05% of the population. The coronavirus death toll of 186,000 is 0.055% of the current population, despite what Joe Biden says. It will go higher, and it's about the same magnitude of those two flus, and it has been less deadly to those under 65 than the flus were. Yet there were no statewide lockdowns, no massive school closings, no closings of office buildings and factories and restaurants and museums. No one considered shutting down Woodstock. So what changed? American media, Maggot-driven fear porn against President Trump. That changed. The anti-lockdown blogger and former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson makes a powerful case that lockdowns delayed rather than prevented infections. So there are old lessons here. Governments can sometimes channel, but they can't entirely control nature. There's no way to entirely eliminate risk of anything ever, leftists, moms, helicopter parents, Karens. Attempts to reduce one risk may very well increase others. Unintended consequences. Amid uncertainty, people make mistakes, like maybe the lockdowns. Then there's a guy, again, Dr. Mark McDonald, continues to tell the truth about hydroxychloroquine. I had to dig long and hard for this one. Let's see if this plays.
Hydroxychloroquine has been a safe and effective medication throughout the world for 65 years. It was developed from tree bark and then turned into quinine, which was used by the British in India to protect against malaria infections. Today, the synthetic form, which is hydroxychloroquine, is used throughout the world. It is actually a WHO-mandated necessary medication to prevent against malaria pandemics. And it's been used in the United States for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis on a daily basis for decades in patients who take it every single day. Women, children, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and elderly adults. Even now in Africa, it's considered to be a supplement and sold over the counter in many countries safely and effectively. Until this year, hydroxychloroquine was considered to be safe for all people. It was only after January of 2020 that hydroxychloroquine became the devil.
What happened in January of 2020? Well, you know.
What do you think? Who's pushing against hydroxychloroquine? Who's behind it?
Well, I think there's a coalition of forces that are behind the push against hydroxychloroquine. It started in January when Gilead Pharmaceuticals announced some benefit to a patented drug called remdesivir that reduced hospital stay course for those with coronavirus by 3 or 4 days. Certainly meaningful, but
money.
It's certainly not curative. As soon as that happened, media, politicians, other special interest groups got on board with trying to stop hydroxychloroquine from being made available by doctors to their patients. And a whole campaign was set against it, including several research publications like The Lancet back in June that published fraudulent data that was later retracted to say that hydroxychloroquine either didn't work or it killed people.
We heard about that, didn't we, earlier?
My belief at this point is that it's all about the election. And there are people now in positions of power, politicians primarily, who will benefit from keeping America scared and stuck at home through November. And if all Americans had access to hydroxychloroquine, the pandemic would essentially end in about 30 days. And if that happens, a lot of people will lose.
Imagine that. Tinfoil hat wearing son of a bitch. From justthenews.com, Stanford expert blasts COVID-19 failures. We quarantined the healthy. We exposed the sick. Stanford professor Jay Bhattacharya talks disastrous decision of loading COVID-19 patients into nursing homes, failing to follow the pandemic playbook. Country after country made the same decision with a couple of exceptions, and I think that was a major problem. The professor said the global community largely abandoned the playbooks following earlier pandemics, instead jumping to a global lockdown. He alluded to the policies in states, such as New York and Pennsylvania, that instructed nursing homes to accept COVID-19 positive patients, decisions where critics have claimed led to a significantly elevated death rate in nursing homes. 50%, how many times do I have to say this? 50% of the coronavirus deaths in the United States of America have been in nursing homes and the elderly. He said, we quarantined the healthy and we exposed the sick. Then, from Reuters, damn them! Some good news kind of slipped out for a second. U.S. COVID-19 cases fall 15% in the past week. Deaths down for 4 weeks. This was on September 14th. Not that long ago. The number of new cases for the novel coronavirus reported in the United States fell 15% last week from a previous 7 days, and deaths fell for a fourth week in a row. Imagine that. Then something incredible occurred. And all of you people with me who said, this stinks. Didn't you and me and everybody else say in January and February, none of this shit passes the smell test? None of it. Well, guess what? None of it passes the smell test. The truth is out. And where did that come from? Where did that truth come from? Don't believe your lying eyes. Listen. What we suspected was confirmed from somebody who ought to know. China is our enemy. September 16th of 2020. COVID-19 genetically engineered to target humans. Li Meng Yang and her team of researchers published a 26-page document laying out how COVID-19 could have been developed artificially in Chinese labs. Li Meng Yan, the Chinese virologist who has been hiding in the U.S. after claiming that the Chinese authorities not only knew about the novel coronavirus long before the first cases were officially reported in Wuhan last December, but has also suggested COVID-19 was created in a Chinese military lab. She has published with her team of researchers a 26-page document laying out her theory that the pandemic sweeping the world is not of natural origin. Well, as you and I know, naturally, inherently, we all said, duh. But the people that said duh, we were the crazy people. We were the tinfoil hat wearers. And then something really strange happened. Just this past week, she appeared on Tucker Carlson.
We're going to do that again right now. Li Meng Yan is the virologist who says she has evidence about where this pandemic actually came from. We're happy to have her on tonight.
And Tucker Carlson wasn't expecting what she said.
Doctor, thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, Tucker. Hi, Tucker. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you've published some of your research. You're planning on publishing more soon. Give us, for a non-scientific audience, a summary of why you believe this virus came from a lab in Wuhan, please.
Okay, briefly, from my first report, I can present the solid scientific evidence to our audience that this virus, COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, actually is not from nature. It is a man-made virus created in the lab based on the China military discovered and owned the very unique bat coronavirus, which cannot affect people, but after the modification becomes a very harmful virus at now. So I have evidence to show why they can do it, what they have done, how did they do it.
So what you're saying is much more sinister even than we've suggested on this show, than Tom Cotton, than almost anyone suggested. You're saying that the Chinese government manufactured this virus, if I'm hearing you correctly. That's what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Based on the virus genome.
She said the wet market story is a smokescreen.
It's basically like our fingerprint. So you can see the very unusual characters in their genome, which clearly, based on the other evidence they left during the modification, we can say finally this is exactly the one come from their own special bat coronavirus and then target human.
Targets
what you're
humans.
Alleging is shocking more even than I anticipated when we invited you on. So I just want to ask the most obvious question, which is this genome presumably is in the possession of many researchers around the world. Why is nobody saying this if it's true?
Yeah, why there is nobody want to say it? It's because of the big suppression come from the Chinese Communist Party government and also their friend in scientific world. So basically, this is very clearly that this virus is like Frankenstein. So he created those things like basically a cow has deer's head, has rabbit's ear, and also have monkey's hand. So they can never get it from the nature. And there were evidence left in the genome. But the scientific world also keeps silence, work together with Chinese Communist Party. They don't want people to know this truth. Also, that's why I get suspended, I get suppression. I am the target that Chinese Communist Party won't be disappeared.
You're a brave person.
They want to disappear her.
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt and assuming you're not an anti-Chinese racist. So it's not clear why Twitter would shut you down or why you're being ignored by the rest of the U.S. media. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Why would the Chinese government intentionally create a virus like this?
Okay, if you want to know the exact motive, the exact idea, I think people have to come to ask them, ask Communist Party, why did they do it? Because they are the one do it. We cannot always understand their evil thinking. You have to come to ask them. But what we see already proves that they have done that. It harmed everyone in the world, lead to the historic pandemic, involve everyone.
How do you believe this virus made its way from the lab in Wuhan outside to the rest of the world?
Okay, first, as I said, I have this kind of solid scientific evidence, and also my next report will come out soon to make you fully understand it is. The other thing is I work in the WHO reference lab, which is the top coronavirus lab in the world in the University of Hong Kong. And since I get deeply into such investigation in secret from the early beginning of this outbreak, I had my intelligence because I also get my own unique network in China, involve the hospital, institute, and also government. Also, I work with the top coronavirologists in the world. So together with my experience, I can tell you, this is created in the lab. This is from that template owned by China military. And also it is spread to the world to make such damage.
To make such damage, do you believe the Chinese government released this intentionally, on purpose? Did they do this?
Yes, of course, it's intentionally. And even no need more evidence, you already can see what they try to cover up from the early beginning, as I reviewed in different medias before, and also what else they have done, like making the fabricated virus to throw out the natural origin theory, censorship, every evidence point to the lab origins, and also clearly try to make people like me want to talk about the truth get disappeared.
You know, it's hard to be shocked in a moment like this, but you have succeeded in shocking me. Unfortunately, this is not the forum for the details of your research. I don't have the grounding necessary to ask you the right questions. This is when you wish for a functioning media, because what you just said completely changes everything we think we know about the pandemic that's wrecking our country. So I really hope, sincerely, that you will be doing many interviews in American media and explaining this in much greater detail. And I hope you'll come back here. Doctor, thank you so much.
Thank you. Everyone needs to know the truth.
Yeah. Shocking. Thank you.
That never passed the smell test. And as a thinking human being, you already intuited that, didn't you? Now you have a Chinese virologist who had to escape from China to avoid being disappeared by the Chinese Communist government because she knows the truth. China, in a lab, weaponized coronavirus so that it would leap to humanity and then released it. He says the media, Tucker Carlson says the media will get right on this. Won't they? In the meantime, the skewed statistics aren't stopping. This is from, again, September 9th. Coronavirus testing at Boston lab suspended after nearly 400 false positives. You didn't hear about this story, but I found it. An investigation by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health found there were at least 383 erroneous positive results. A Boston lab suspended coronavirus testing after an investigation uncovered nearly 400 false positive COVID-19 results. Origin, a biotechnology company which counts dozens of nursing homes as its clients, ceased testing on August 8th at the request of the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. It's only coming out now. The suspension came days after state health officials became aware of an unusually high number of positive coronavirus tests. An investigation found there were at least 383 inaccurate positive results from that lab test upon retesting, came back as negative. And just in case you didn't think the CDC was incompetent, well, wait. Here's more incompetence. CDC says aerosol guideline was posted in error to the website. This is from September 21st, just a couple of days ago. Atlanta. On Friday, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention updated their guidelines to say the coronavirus can be spread through tiny respiratory droplets called aerosols that can linger in the air. But according to reports from the Washington Post and the CNBC, the CDC now says, well, it posted that information to its website in error. So either the CDC was lying then or they're lying now. I'm confident about that. Here are the facts we better get used to. We'll never know. We'll never know precisely how many people were hospitalized behind Wuhan 19. We'll never know precisely how many people were killed strictly behind Wuhan 19. And we will only be able to guesstimate how many people have had their work lives destroyed, their businesses destroyed, and how many people eventually committed suicide behind being locked up in their homes and all of the other associated physical and mental issues. Because we're so much smarter today, aren't we? Or are we? The whole point of this show is to ask questions and, moreover, to learn something from this massively costly and unnecessary deadly experience itself. So to date, what have we learned? Open America up. And we've also learned this. Wuhan 19 lockdowns have little, if anything, to do with actual science. They do, however, have everything to do with politics and the impending re-election of President Donald John Trump, OMB, the guy with the dead orange cat on his head. And otherwise, I would have ended the show right here, but wait. Then I found this. This is what I want you to hear. I'm going to try to get through this. For my final illustration, I refer to the NewYorkPost.com. It's a situation I guarantee you heard nothing of, because the job of the American media maggots is to protect the Demorat Party, the club of original racism, and all of its aligned anarchist elements. Racism? What the hell is BZ talking about? Here's the headline. COVID-19 patient was black and paralyzed, so doctors decided his life wasn't worth saving. This is from July 10th. Last month, a disabled 46-year-old African-American man was euthanized without his consent or that of his wife. But rather than exploding amid our racial justice moment, the story hardly yielded a peep from those who control our national discourse. In 2017, a man named Michael Hickman suffered a brain injury that left him paralyzed. Still, he was able to enjoy many activities, having books read to him, listening to music, answering trivia questions. He had memory problems, but he recalled his birthday and his social security number with ease. Michael was leading the kind of life many people with disabilities do, not without difficulties, but intrinsically valuable and dignified. Then Michael Hickson contracted COVID-19, and he was admitted to St. David's Medical Center of South Austin, Texas. A disagreement over his care led to a medical decision-making being taken away from his wife and given to the state and to the medical team. I have a photo of this, which I'm not going to show because I can't see it again. The story continues. Mike didn't do well, and he needed intensive care. His wife, Melissa, apparently did not trust his medical team and decided to legally record the exchange she had with her husband's doctor. As the recording shows, they agreed that Michael should not be intubated, but Melissa still wanted Michael to be treated aggressively. The doctor insisted aggressive treatment wouldn't help him improve, and right now, his quality of life, he doesn't have much of one. That's the doctor talking. Melissa was taken aback. She said, "What do you mean?" "Because he's paralyzed with a brain injury, he doesn't have quality of life." "Correct," the doctor flatly replied. Pressed further by Melissa, who admirably kept her cool, the doctor admitted he'd had 3 patients survive who were in Michael's situation, but claimed her husband's case doesn't fit those 3. Michael's quality of life is different from theirs, she was told. The others were walking and talking people. Melissa tried to respond, but the doctor had enough. I don't mean to be frank or abrasive, but at this point, we're going to do what we feel is best for him along with the state, and this is what we decided. Melissa did get in one last shot by telling him that this was a decision to kill her husband, and she had good reason to think so. Giving her husband food, water, oxygen, and medicine would not have been burdensome treatment, and Michael may have beaten the odds. The hospital had plenty of space for him. The issue the doctor made clear was Michael's disability. The state and the hospital decided they shouldn't try to save someone with his disabilities. I'm going to read that again. The hospital had plenty of space for him. The issue, the doctor made clear, was Michael's disability. The state and the hospital decided they shouldn't try to save someone with his disabilities. After pro-life journalists broke the story on June 26th, the National Council on Disability publicly called on the Federal Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services to investigate the hospital for violating Michael's civil rights. When a medical facility makes a decision to deny medical care to a person with a disability, this is based on or influenced by biased views about life with a disability, it runs afoul of federal civil rights laws, the group said. Yet when the Washington Post, a paper otherwise all in on outing structural racism, picked up the story, it framed Melissa's claims skeptically and credulously accepted the hospital's word that it wasn't possible to save Michael and that none of its decisions was based on the basis of his disability. Sorry, but the recording was clear. An institution with power over Michael's very life had deemed it a life unworthy of life. But wait, there's more. Owing to structural health disparities, many African Americans have a justified fear of being treated like throwaway people in a clinical setting, particularly when it comes to so-called end-of-life decisions. And because doctors are often ableist in their assumptions, the vulnerability of African American patients are magnified when they're disabled. Health providers consistently rate the quality of life of their disabled patients worse than the patients themselves. When confronted with the fact that patients generally prefer length of life to quality of life, many physicians find themselves surprised and admit, we think we know what is best for a patient, but this is often wrong. It's appalling. So if you care about racial justice, remember Michael Hickson. Say his name and tell his story. So, due to an issue not of his making, Michael Hickson was euthanized because he contracted coronavirus while disabled. Remember this. In 2017, Michael Hickson suffered a brain injury that left him paralyzed. Still, he was able to enjoy many activities, having books read to him, listening to music, answering trivia questions. He had memory problems, but he recalled his birthday and social security number with ease. And so here we go. Why should Michael Hickson live? How productive is he going to be? Shouldn't we just let him die? Well, great words, because it's no longer a question. He's no longer a problem. He's just dead. Aren't you proud, America? Isn't this what you want, Demorats and leftists? Winnowing the field, culling the herd. Introducing the most virulent diseases of 2020 into nursing facilities, mandating by law that those persons infected with Wuhan 19 be placed into buildings containing in small rooms those Americans with the least possible physical ability to fight off the Wuhan 19. America's elderly and being shocked when almost 50% of American deaths from the virus are, in fact, from nursing homes. Oh, yeah, as I mentioned 3 times before, where, by the way, the staffs are the least trained and possess the least amount of proper equipment. Ezekiel Emanuel, remember him? He was talking about death boards. Nobody should live over the age of 75. And the unborn and the just born should be killed as well. Michael Hickson was not a chunk of flesh. He was responsive. He was aware. He caught a virus, so he was euthanized like a dog or a horse with a broken leg. This is September of 2020. But this is where we are as a nation, in medicine, in government. And still people lie to you and to me day after day after day. This is how we do things in the United States of America in September of 2020.
Monsieur has been locked!
We'll meet again. Don't know when, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again. Don't know when, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good
Good night, Jim Bob. Asleep.
Good night, and good luck.